For those who are unfamiliar with Jesse Elder, he appeared on episode 96, 97, 95, one of those. I'll link it in the show notes, but he is back. He is back for another. And he is an action philosopher, time piercer, author, mentor, speaker, entrepreneur, and lover of life. You are a lover of life, man. Like every time I see you, have the freaking biggest smile on your face. You're so happy to see me. It's like a puppy dog, and you're like that with every one of your friends. It's amazing.
My friends, yes.
Yeah. That's true. Maybe like throw you back in a corporate world or something like that. It might not be the case, but through the Mind Vitamin video series, Jesse teaches self-mastery for the real world. People from all walks of life and levels of influence use these videos to focus their thinking and enhance their productivity and happiness. So today we're going to be talking about something that relates to time piercing. I think it does. And it's prepping, especially with the things that are happening in the world, the things that are present in reality, various nefarious agendas that are at play. I think this is a conversation that needs to be had. And the reason that I wanted to have you on rather than some of these other preppers that I, could have contacted, some that are local to Texas, is that I know that you deeply, deeply understand, not only do you understand, but you teach that this is the most powerful force in existence. So you're not coming at prepping from a doom and gloom, focus on worst case scenario, sort of like you said, what the TV likes to program us to believe preppers are like.
Right.
You're coming at it from an understanding of the creative power of this, the co-creative power that we have here. And we have a little group that gathers once a month in Austin that is typically focused on law. I think this relates to law though. And you brought up in the chat that this has been on your heart for a while to talk about this. And you sort of were just giving this long, really incredible monologue on your philosophy, your approach to prepping. And it blew me away. It was incredible. And I was sitting on it for a while. I was like, I don't know if I want to bother Jesse and bring him on to talk about this. But because of the things that are going on in the world, especially because of the hysteria around the things that are going on in the world, I was like, we got to do this. So I hit you up and here you are.
Yeah. Well, it's an honor, man. Always. I mean, all of our conversations are just like pinball, it's just like, there's so many different topics. And yeah, that day at the meetup was, it was special because when you can take a topic that is on the surface so potentially fear inducing or fear releasing as prepping, it's polarizing to say the least. And I think what we'll get into today are some different ways of looking at something that really is part of who we are as human beings, to be not just self-reliant, but deeply interdependent with one another. And that's something that so many people have gotten away from because we live in this very decentralized society. Yeah. A lot of that decentralization is very powerful, and it's incredibly, I mean, the fact that you can just connect with people anywhere in the world, and we have a super computer that's beyond what Star Trek could have envisioned.
Right.
Like, that's awesome. And people have become, and we probably won't get into the history of it, but at least since the Civil War, people have just become increasingly domesticated. And it's like declawed, defanged, neutered. And so the idea of being responsible for yourself is just a freak out topic for anybody. Then you add in some catalyzing event, whether it's a hurricane or other things that have happened throughout history, economic collapses, civil wars, revolutions, social unrest, genocides, famines, real or, natural or man-made, war, EMPs. Next thing you know, people just hit the circuit breaker, and then they just flip out, but they're still drawn to World War Z and Mad Max. And there's just like this very weird relationship that people have. And so hopefully what we can do today is just kind of cut through some of the fog and just create a reconnection with everyone's individual ability to create, not just create their reality, but create in their reality. And yeah, we're going to go to some cool places today.
Incredible. And really what I want to do with this is like that gathering that we had. I want to just give the floor to you, and then I'll just interject as necessary to ask questions that I feel are good to ask, or
cool.
Yeah. So
cool.
Let's do that.
All right. For context, like I had a Tom Sawyer childhood, like we talked about a lot on the last episode. And I was the kid that had, you know, a fish hook and, you know, wax wrapped matches and a pocket knife or two and a bouillon cube for some reason and Band-Aids. And this is like, these are my pockets growing up. And I just always felt, I just felt cool. You know, it's like being 8, 9, 10-year-old kid growing up in South Texas and homeschooled or unschooled. So
not even homeschooled. You've never like, your parents just sent you out. You've never sat behind a desk in your entire life.
No. Yeah. It was do your chores in the morning. We'll see you at dinner. We love you.
Yeah. Incredible.
And there's, I mean, that's a little bit loose, but so I just always remember how good it felt to have things on me. And then as I got older, it was having a bus schedule, you know, and having 40 cents. And with that 40 cents and a bus schedule, I could go anywhere in San Antonio. Like it was just that excitement and the freedom of just feeling like the world is a playground, you know?
Yeah.
And fast forward to 2020, when, you know, all the theatrics started, March, April, May. You know, I just moved into a building downtown, and I figured this is going to be a great year. And it was a great year, but not for the reasons I thought. After the lockdowns happened and all this stuff, I was like, man, I'm not going to learn anything sitting here in my apartment looking online. I need to get out in the world. So I packed up my 4Runner, and just did like a 7,000-mile road trip around these United States. And it was very cool. It was that Tom Sawyer feeling again. It's like, I've got everything with me that I need. I've got some food. I've got a rooftop tent. I've got, you know, a bunch of extra fuel cans, and I want to get out there and go see the world. And so I did. First thing I did was drive to the hospitals in LA. I'm like, let me see these things. And
what did you find when you were there?
I was a ghost town.
Of course it was.
Yeah,
of course. What month was this? Do you remember?
This is June and July.
So right at the quote height of the pandemic, they're completely empty. Of course.
Yeah.
Heard that from I interviewed so many nurses and doctors, and did a panel with a few different nurses that were in the epicenter in New York City, and they were like, our hospital was a ghost town. This is a so-called epicenter. So,
yeah. Well, it was on that road trip, and just connected with friends, and I mean, I was making quite a bit of money because, you know, times of uncertainty, people are seeking certainty, and almost all of the tools and practices that I teach are about removing the programming that keeps people from connecting with themselves and with their faith, whatever that is. And so I'm just on this road trip, and I'm like, I felt like a kid again. I was like, I can drive any direction I want. And it was just that, you know, innocent, fun, free feeling. And on somewhere in probably Utah, like 3:00 in the morning, this idea just occurred to me to get land. And you know how when a thought pops in that feels a little bit more magnetic than other thoughts, you know? And so I'm driving, I'm like, that's interesting. And immediately my response was, I'm a nomad, bro. Like I'm staying at a place for a year or two at a time. Why would I get land? But it was it just felt, there's just a quiet rightness to the thought. And so, I'm just driving down the road, nobody on the road. I open up my phone and start looking at property around Austin. And, for those people, I'm sure there would be people watching this who would be like, you shouldn't text and drive. I'm like, well, if a Comanche warrior can put 6 arrows in the air riding bareback, I think I can drive and be on my phone. Not
especially if you're on a like stretch of highway where there's no one on it. Like, my God, dude.
Yeah, exactly. So I started looking at property, and the feeling that I got was the same feeling as when I was a kid and I had a pocket full of, you know, tools and devices and, you know, granola bars and, you know, a poncho, You know, it was just like, I don't know why, but this just feels right.
Mhm.
And so, long story short, I ended up finding land, bought 20 acres outside of Bastrop, which is 45 minutes east of Austin, raw land, and didn't really even know why. Like, it was like a Field of Dreams kind of thing, you know, that movie with Kevin Costner.
Yeah.
And then little by little, the vision started coming in of having a place that would provide, at the very least, a level of food freedom. And again, having like a nomadic background felt very weird to me, because I felt and feel just as comfortable having, you know, my phone, passport, and credit card in a backpack and just doing one-way tickets around the world as it felt having land. Like it was very interesting. And so I got the land, ended up attracting some amazing people to help build out this vision of a food forest and garden and animals. And I didn't see myself living out there, but it just felt important to have food. And so that definitely checked a box that didn't even exist before the sort of idea when I was driving. And then I began to really reflect on what I observe is happening in the world. And I started to extrapolate out possible scenarios. I don't know if you've seen there's a chilling infographic that shows the 10 steps to genocide.
Yes, I have.
Yeah.
And at the time, it seemed that
We were
a lot
at,
of those
level
were being,
6.
a lot of those were being
Yeah.
checked off.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. And
Specifically towards people who were resistant to the COVID measures.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Absolutely. I mean, just, I've got a whole photo album full of news articles and Jimmy Kimmel skits, you know, saying, you know, guy who gobbled horse goo, rest in peace, Wheezy.
Yeah.
Guy who's vaccinated, guy having a heart attack, come right in.
Yeah.
It's like,
yeah. And a lot of people pushing out sentiments that hoping unvaccinated people die.
Yeah.
Like openly saying that. It was pretty wild.
And it was just, I mean, that's a whole kind of other thing. But as I'm watching this happen, it was very interesting. I ended up writing a lot of fiction during that time, and it was very cathartic, and it helped me to sense make. But the steady rhythm underneath all of that was like, get ready to duck, you know, and not that there's anything to be afraid of, but it just tied back to that feeling that I had when I was a kid. It's like, it just feels better to be ready.
Right.
And I don't know if we talked about this last time, but I think it connects to what we're going to get into today.
Yeah.
You know, words don't teach anything. Like, experiences teach.
Yeah.
Words can direct attention, and I believe attention is the currency of transformation. But words by themselves can only activate meaning within us and direct our attention. And when I was a kid, because I was so into like survival and first aid and camping and all this stuff, and I remember learning to like wrap an ankle, you know, with the Boy Scout handbook before it became super woke, but it was like awesome. Actually, it was like really, really good. And I remember learning how to do this, and I always had my, you know, my bandages with me, and we went on a hike. Did we talk about this?
We didn't talk about this on the episode. We talked about this at the
at the
gathering.
meetup. Okay. Yeah. Well,
this is an awesome story.
This is good. And it ties directly into where we're going on the whole, this particular mindset. So I'm learning to, you know, do basic first aid, and my family, we went on a hike. We went camping out at Garner State Park here in Texas, and we're on this trail. And it was my dad, my mom, one of my brothers. I don't remember if the second one had been born yet, and my uncle. And we're on this hike, and we're coming down this trail, rocky trail. And all of a sudden, this is my memory of, it's like super vivid. My uncle, who's like my cool uncle, wipes out and just goes like tumbling. And then he stops and he's holding his ankle. He's like, like he's in all this pain. And I just remember everybody was like, what do we do? And my little like 8-year-old brain is like, I've got just the thing. And I had my bandage, and I like wrapped his ankle. And then I showed them how to make like a figure 4, you know, with their arms and carry him down. And I just remember feeling like I just know what to do, because I've been practicing and training on all this stuff. And we get down to the campsite, and remarkably, there's no swelling on his ankle. And it was just like, it was a good moment, you know? And I felt useful, and I felt like it feels good to know what to do. It dawned on me that they staged the whole thing.
Yeah.
Like, his ankle wasn't busted. They set the thing up to give, my 8-year-old self a chance to step up and lead and deliver.
Yeah.
And I'm like, first of all, championship parenting, like incredible.
Round of applause.
Yeah.
Incredible.
And just, it was that sort of experience that really helped me to develop a tremendous sense of a balance between being curious about always wanting to learn things that were useful, and an increasing level of self-trust and self-confidence that if something happens, I'll know what to do. And if I don't know what to do, I'll be able to figure it out or connect with people who know. And there was just an immediacy to it. And so that, plus the absence of disconnected academic learning, it just, all of that flashed forward back in 2020. And I began to think, man, how first of all, how weird could things get? Weird. And how do I want to navigate that? How do I want to move through the world if things continue to go in the direction they were going? I mean, if we plotted from, end of February 2020 to October 2020, November 2020, where you're facing a long winter of death, or whatever the founding president said, I was like, okay, well, if we were here and now we're here, what's the future?
Yeah.
So I made a conscious choice. I'm going to go all in to be as resilient, as anti-fragile, as in the fight world, we would say agile, mobile, and hostile. And so the hostile part, I'm because of having some fight background, I understood enough about violence to know that our brains are not equipped to understand violence. Like, you just can't, unless you've had direct physical experience. Our brains just don't understand it.
Right.
And yet violence is the single biggest force that has shaped human history.
Yeah.
And so I'm all these thoughts are swirling around, and I'm thinking, okay, well, what would be the thing that would bring me the most peace? And I began to really meditate on that question. And I realized that I was heading into a really, like, a spiritual cul-de-sac. I was heading into a dead end, because I was beginning to look outside for sources of safety. And I remember, man, I was living at the W Hotel, like, very, very nice place. And I'm already thinking, how much rope do I need to get off the balcony? If what?
Right.
Like, if what? Like, where did that thought come from?
Right.
Like, what would possibly be happening in the hall
Right.
that I would need to rappel off the balcony?
Yeah.
But this is where my brain's going.
Right.
And I just started thinking about, like, catching things everywhere. And, what if it was a little unsettling, honestly.
Well, it's because of what you teach, though. Because of what you teach yourself, you're able to catch yourself in that act, like of going down, like you said, this spiritual cul-de-sac, and sort of going down these really dark, worst case scenario rabbit holes, and like, whoa.
Yeah.
Let's step back for a second. What am I doing?
Yeah. Well, and what I observed within my own thoughts and my own feelings is, it's very easy, even seductive, to start putting attention on things outside yourself, your immediate life, your friendships, your business, etc. When those things are not deeply fulfilling and nourishing and rewarding, it's very easy to start looking outside to go find dragons to slay, when really it's like, hey, maybe you should just, like, take care of yourself. And at that time, I was teaching a ton. I was doing live videos almost every day, tons of courses. So I was very professionally active, but personally, I was ignoring a lot of stuff that just hadn't been resolved. Past relationship stuff, and, some larger concerns. This is even before I started getting into law, but I hadn't filed taxes in, since 2015. So that part was still like, and I realized that there's a lot that I'm avoiding that is making this external adventure even more attractive. So that I could, rather than sitting in like, hand on heart and like, what am I really feeling, is just easier to go to Cabela's and just go buy a bunch of ammo, and they're like, check that protector provider box, instead of creating safety within myself. And so I was able to navigate that, but still the feeling of it just feels good to be ready.
Yeah.
And I just decided I'm not going to give any attention to the what if scenarios. I'm just going to increase, like following Maslow's hierarchy. I'm just going to start at the very bottom and then work my way up. And it became unbelievably liberating.
Yeah.
Because it was no longer an avoidance of a fear. It was a pursuit of a passion. And in that pursuing of the passion, all this other stuff started to come up. I have a men's community called Sigma University. We just had an event a couple weeks ago. And one of the things that I shared in there is, if you look historically, for hundreds, maybe thousands of years, the records of all these different societies and civilizations and tribes and villages, the number one prayer, wish, offering to the gods for a man to die, the number one way that a man wanted to die was gloriously.
Mm-hmm.
Fast forward, and now the number one way that people say that they would want to die is peacefully in their sleep.
Mm. What do you make of that?
I think it's part of the domestication.
Yeah.
And the fact that, most people don't have hordes kicking in their doors and trying to, kill them and rape their women and all of that. But that also carries a consequence.
Yeah.
Because you don't need to be, like, most people delegate protection.
Yeah.
There was a guy that I was an entrepreneur. He was from California, and I was giving him a ride to the airport, and I had my pistol case in the back of my truck, and he was like, "Do you have a gun?" I'm like, "A couple, yeah." And he was like, "Man, I just can't imagine having a gun." I said, "I get it. Like, I grew up like without any kind of guns, very, peaceful. Like, we were super socially active, social issues."
Yeah.
And then I realized I have all this strong aversion to something that I have actually no experience in. And that seemed weird to me. So I bought a gun, learned to shoot. And all of a sudden I was like, "Oh, I get it." And he said, "Yeah, I just can't imagine owning a gun." I said, "Well, you do." And he said, "No, I don't." I said, "Yes, you do. You've just delegated its use to someone else, and you hope that they'll arrive if you ever need it." And then he was like, "Oh shit."
Mm-hmm.
We've become so disconnected from the dangers of life because we don't have to be connected to the dangers of life.
Right.
And I think that's a good thing.
Mm.
But that places, I believe, a tremendous responsibility on individuals who want to remain fully human, that we can't delegate safety to external things or organizations or governments or anything else. And so that the decision to pursue a passion rather than avoid a fear unlocked so much creativity and so much, like, I felt like that kid again. And I just felt like, man, this is awesome.
What comes up for me is it's begging the question on what does it mean to be human? Like, what does it actually mean to be a human being? Is this domesticated version what it means to be human? Maybe, possibly. Is that where we're heading towards? I hope not.
Yeah.
Or is it this past version of man where man overwhelmingly wishes to die gloriously? My favorite movie, I've shared this before, is Legends of the Fall. I don't know if you've seen that. Yeah. Tristan, Brad Pitt's character. Best Brad Pitt role ever, by the way. But he dies fighting a freaking bear. You remember that scene at the very end? Like, he grew up very Native American, kind of mixed in with Native Americans and also his family. And he was more relating to the Native Americans, and that sort of earth-based lifestyle had a huge impression on him. And you see his character throughout the movie living gloriously, kind of putting himself in dangerous situations to live and feel alive.
Right.
And it's like that meme of a lion where it's like, this lion, and it's showing a lion in a zoo, gets all of its meals handed to him, doesn't have to worry about hunting for food, gets healthcare when it needs it, has a place to sleep, doesn't have to worry. And that lion looks incredibly, atrophied, sad, doesn't look like a fucking lion.
Right.
versus this lion has to hunt for its food. This lion has to go out and face danger. This lion could be killed at any time. This lion doesn't have a place to sleep automatically. It could lose its family, its cubs, and it looks alive. It's alive.
It's vital.
It's a lion.
It's vital.
Yeah.
And I believe that nature rewards efficiency and punishes inefficiency.
Yeah.
So if the lion has a function, and its function is not like anything in nature, purpose is not outcome.
Yeah.
Like nothing in nature has an outcome. It's just a series of harmonious process.
Right.
And so by the lion being the lion, it's contributing and it's receiving in perfect equity with everything in its immediate environment. Yeah. Can't be any other way. Humans are the only thing in this dimension anyway that I'm aware of that can psychologically opt out of natural process and try and replicate natural process. So if a human, and it's a great question, like what does it mean to be human? Again, going back to the men's work in Sigma University, one of the premises there is that what does it mean to be a good man? Most people immediately start thinking in terms of moral codes or values or principles. My thought on it is like, what does it mean to be a good man? It's like, what does it mean to be a good star or to be a good son? It means being good at being a son, like good at being what you're born to be. And a man's number one purpose is to create safety.
Yes.
And in order for him to create safety, he must have equal parts love and lethality. Because if he doesn't have lethality and he's only got love, then he has to rely on social skills, social camouflage, avoiding disapproval, seeking approval, becoming valuable in the marketplace, all these different things, because he knows that if things went kinetic, he wouldn't be able to deal with it. And so he becomes the nice guy and claims to be peaceful. But you can only be peaceful if you are choosing peace. And you can only choose peace if you can also equally choose violence. So for a man who claims to be safe and loving and peaceful, if he doesn't have the capacity and the skills and the mindset to use violence intelligently, then he can't be peaceful. He's just harmless.
Yeah.
So a man must have equal parts love and lethality. If he's only lethal and he's only brutal and he lacks love and compassion, then he doesn't, his protector doesn't get activated.
Right.
Then he's just a predator.
Right.
And so back to this idea then, what is a good man? In my understanding, it is a man who is good at being a man. It's simple. So expand a little bit more. What does it mean to be a good human? I think it means that you're good at being a human. So then what are humans and what are we here for? I think we're here to advance the universe. And I think that we are the 8th day team. If on the 7th day God rested, well, what happened on the 8th day? And God's just like, tag, you're in. You are my hands, my eyes, my ears. You're my balls. You're my pussy. You're my backbone. You're me out here in this leading edge reality. And you can do the one thing that I can't, which is to make choices. Because if you're God and you are literally everything and you're everywhere and you're every when, where do you go? Like, what's next?
Yeah.
Then I think we do the thing that God can't do, which is choose. And I think God does the things that we can't do, which is to create, to fulfill the material counterpart to our thoughts.
Yeah.
And I think that's what a human is for. I think that's what human beings exist for.
Bridge between spirit and matter.
Yeah.
Bridge between the heavens and the earth.
Well,
bringing God here.
We have the thing that nothing else has, at least that we know of, which is imagination.
Right.
And we can imagine a future that's different than the present. And then we can wield tools and thoughts and communication. And we'll get into it probably in a little bit, but actually influence reality.
Right.
And I think that's what a human is. And that's what a human does. But I also think that because of just how when we observe the natural world evolving, every species specializes. And then as a species evolves and advances, it specializes in response to its environment, and it probably impacts its environment. And so there's just all this responsive specialization. Humans, I think, are just going to continue to sort of fractal out, and we're going to have all these. I mean, look at how many different kinds of body types there are, and look how many different kinds of I'm not big for personality types, but I mean, look how many different personalities.
Right.
And then that's only like maybe the hardware, then when it comes to beliefs and values and
orientation on reality, you can be sitting in the same room as someone, have the same experience, and have a totally different outcome or perception of that experience.
Very
literally
much
different worlds.
Yeah. Totally different worlds.
Yeah.
So I don't think that there is a, like a basic preferred baseline for what a human should be. And I think that's part of the beauty of this world and this particular time, is that there's so many things on the menu of what do you want to be?
Yeah.
And I think a lot of people are using that universal principle of, like, if you think it's real, and then they can choose to believe that they're not a man, or they can choose to believe they're not a woman. Awesome. Like, what's that to me?
Right.
I will draw the line at changing my language to reflect your reality, because I believe there is a man and there is a woman. And I think those are the two things that are in this universe. But not only does it not affect me, I actually have an appreciation for the power of imagination to craft and cultivate someone's reality so that feels good for them and that feels safe for them. Awesome. But going back to domesticated versus wild, I think the only speaking subjectively, the only thing that makes sense is to remain as responsibly feral as possible.
Yeah.
And to increase the certainty within the uncertainty of not only the world, but within yourself. And, giving yourself the freedom to feel your feelings and to think your thoughts and to explore curiosities. And if there is any moral code that I think is sustainable, it's for me, it's simple. It's do no harm and take no shit.
Yeah.
And within that, there's a huge playground.
Yeah. So
back to this idea of preparing and prepping, it has continued to be, it's a little over 4 years now since I actively began learning and exploring and experiencing and tactically doing things to increase my own freedom and I don't even want to say the term survival, because then we get into the conversation that death's not even real.
Yeah, we don't end.
So that actually is why this is so fun for me.
Right.
Because I do wish for a glorious death.
Yeah.
And I don't care when it happens. If it happens today or it happens 100 years from now.
Yeah.
What's that to me? Like,
and this is such another important point too, is like, can you remember that your true nature is infinite and eternal, but not disassociate along that thought pattern to where you're not fully immersed in this experience and here for all of it? Like, that is the balance. And I feel like that is the powerful soul, the soul who can do both, not be so in this experience that they're like afraid because they believe that this is the only thing that there is, but also not disassociating along the lines of I'm infinite and eternal, to where they're not actually present in reality. Right. Can you hold both of those at the same time and be here for all of it?
Right. Right. And that's the sweet spot, right? It's like swinging the pendulum between, like, I see this in the work that I do I work with a lot of entrepreneurs who are in every way winning the modern game. Their businesses are doing amazing. Their health is on point. Their relationships are thriving. And the biggest challenge for somebody who's winning is to keep finding new ways to invent from sheer creativity, not from the desperation or trauma that launched the business in the first place. And the reason I say that is because there's like this pendulum that's always swinging. And on one side, you have just insane levels of competence and value creation ability and like thought to think. You have an idea, you launch it, business is good, great. But then there tends to be a disconnect from like pure creativity and imagination, which requires a tremendous amount of self-knowledge and self-acceptance and self-awareness. But then the pendulum swings the other way, and there are probably more people who experience a connection with themselves, with their creator, who are able to cultivate feelings of peace and, mitigate their own stress levels and, remain unattached, but they can't seem to find traction with value creation in the real world. So you got the people that are like hustling, but like miserable. And then you have the people that are blissful and broke. And it just always seemed to me like, why choose?
Yeah.
Like, why can't you have both?
You can have both, right?
And so
you can have your cake and eat it too.
Right, exactly.
Right.
And bake it, and then sell it, it's like it's endless. But then I started to think about that in terms of prepping, because I never studied prepping. I never watched anything until 2020 hit. And I'm like, oh yeah, like this feels like when I was a kid and I had a pocket full of fish hooks and bouillon cubes. And now I have 20 acres and I've got, a year and a half's worth of food at that time. And I've got 15,000 rounds of ammo and I've got, but it felt fun. And then I watched my first prepper video and I was like, oh my God, you poor people. Like
Right.
You're so afraid.
Yeah.
Like so afraid. And then I began feeling the energy of this, and I don't want to generalize, but there is a vibe to the prepper community. And then I began to notice how the confirmation bias of the video creators who are incentivized psychologically and financially to create this sense of urgency,
yes,
which mirrors the urgency that people feel, which I don't think has anything to do with COVID or monkeypox or EMPs or anything else. I think that urgency is something that you're not dealing with within yourself. If you deal with it when you're within yourself, I don't fucking care. If I see a mushroom cloud, I'm like, woohoo, all right, lean in, here it comes. Like, I want to see it coming.
Right.
And if it's far enough away, then I'll be like,
right.
let's just be like a jet ski on the waves, let's just like surf
ride the waves.
Yeah, ride the waves, surf the reality. And I recognize that I have a very relatively sheltered perspective. It's like I'm a straight white North American male. It's like my soul picked the easy level. It's just like we're gonna take it easy this time.
Yeah.
It's like I get it. And I can't do anything about that. And I recognize that there are tremendous number of people throughout history and today who would simply not have the emotional, physical faculties to have this conversation because of the intensities that they're in or the intensities they've gone through. So I recognize that this is a very, I don't use the word privileged, but it's a relatively sheltered perspective. All that being said, the feeling or the practice of being as self-reliant as possible is something that I think, and I can't say this for anybody else, I have a responsibility to myself to be as natural and wild in the sense of connected to the actual forces that this whole world is created with and surrounded by, while also developing the softer, more feminine, finer qualities of, having a sense of humor or being creative or writing poetry or music.
Yeah.
Those things are equally important, but without that grounding in physical reality and at least an awareness of the realities of violence, I think you lose your humanity.
Right.
And I think even the word humanity has been sort of co-opted to, it's like, the communists when they start using love and compassion.
Totally.
And it's like, okay. And then, so humanity has kind of become a little bit of the same thing. I think that we do have the responsibility to be true to ourselves, and leaning into prepping, which is even just a weird word, being more prepared for anything that might happen it creates such a foundation for play and for higher creative functioning and creativity and relating and all these things. Because it's just like, if you know how to fight, that box, that like the limbic box is checked.
Right.
And so like I can't imagine walking in a room and being worried that some guy's going to kick my ass.
Right.
You know, it's like that, it just clears out space.
Right.
And I began to feel the same thing. And I started to see this with people that I was working with and helping them to prepare. It chills you out.
Right.
But it is that razor's edge, because the more prepared you are, the more you realize how much more there is. And next thing you know, you're like, shit, I don't have 10 generators. What's wrong with me?
Right.
You know? So I think it's just always staying on that razor's edge of doing it because it feels right and even fun.
Right.
And the fun part for me is because I don't take this life that seriously.
What does freedom require? Responsibility.
Yeah.
Like you look at that, back to that
Yeah.
lion thing, right?
Yeah.
Like so many people that listen to this podcast, watch this podcast, follow you, follow me, they're interested in freedom. They would consider themselves to be freedom oriented. So just for the sake of wanting to cultivate more freedom in your life, it requires that you take responsibility in all the areas where you weren't before. That's simply it. It doesn't have to be about the potential worst case scenarios of what might happen. Just by being more responsible for yourself, a byproduct of that might look like, for you and your individual circumstances, that no matter what comes, I am prepared. Just because I have done the work, because I desire more freedom in my life, to take full responsibility for myself and my surroundings.
Yeah, that's really well said. The freedom and responsibility, I mean, that's an obvious thing for I guess for those that see it. The being ready for anything part is where I've found the most juice, like the most energy, because there's always, you reach a point where you're like, oh yeah, I'm not ready for that. Which then forces the question, well, let's say it happens. And I mean, maybe this is morbid, but like it always comes down to that final moment.
Yeah. It
always comes down to that last minute. And I want to see it coming. And I want to know, like, I don't care how long I live. I expect to live a very long time, and I live my life as if I'm going to live a long time, but I also live my life as if this is it. Like, this is the last day. And because of that, there's just a removal of fear of what if, and then it becomes a positive what if. It's like, oh man, like, would I become a warlord? I don't think so. But then it's like, probably not, but maybe instead of like, you know, weapons, we just have like psychedelics, you know, and just like, maybe we can weaponize these psychedelics just in case, you know, have people
weaponize the thought energy by using psychedelics.
Totally. I mean, you get a horde of cartel members coming out and launch the Molly bombs and just watch them just like trip out, you know, I'd be fine with that.
Oh shit, man. Yeah. Well, on that note, this is a good time, I think, to talk about. And then I want to get into the actuals of how you approach prepping, of the understanding, or what I'll speak to myself personally. I know you would largely agree with this. What I've come to understand is that this reality that we're in is, I would say, to a certain degree, dictated by the amalgamation of thought energy that is directed towards it. And if that seems too woo-woo for you, obviously go back and listen to the episodes with Veda Austin, Eileen McCusick, because I would argue that they're demonstrating this, as has Greg Braden, Bruce Lipton, and Joe Dispenza, other people like this, right? And then Rupert Sheldrake. There's so many other people that we could talk about. But if that seems too woo-woo for you, at the very least, your thoughts, feelings, and beliefs are largely going to dictate your actions or inactions. So the point that I'm getting at is, yes, it is important to take accountability and responsibility for our thought energy and what we're directing in this reality, without question, with the understanding that reality itself is dictated by the amalgamation of all these overlapping thought energies and belief systems. So because of that, there is an infinite possibility of scenarios for the future? And do I think that you can truly cultivate a life of coherence on a day-to-day basis in your little pocket, even if the rest of the world goes mad? Yes. And in the same breath, were there likely people in North Carolina that were already doing that with what just happened in North Carolina? Yes, there was. I do think there was. So my point is that it's not a fail-safe, if that's the right word. Like it's not impenetrable, this mindset. And that's where things like this conversation become important, because you can still hold the understanding that, yes, I am co-creating this experience, but I am in the midst of a bunch of other people who either wittingly or unwittingly are co-creating that which I don't want. And because of that, and because of maybe some of the happenings of this realm outside of even weather modification, just fucking a volcano erupting.
Yeah.
Like, I think that is programmed, if you will, into the way this realm works to in ways that we can't understand. So it seeks coherence. It seeks coherence at some level, right?
Yeah.
And because of all of that and all of these sort of things that are overlaying on top of each other, it does require that we be prepared to a large degree. But again, not lean into the doom and gloom scenarios of what if. Be aware of those things, be aware of the possibilities to come, and maybe make it fun when you realize that you're an infinite eternal being, right? And at the same time, direct your thought energy on creating that which you want. It's both.
Yes. It's so well said, man. That the amalgamation that you're speaking of, it's obvious. I mean, we live in this incredibly connected world. And even before we had information technology and Wi-Fi and, all the G's, 3, 4, 5, even before that, we're still in a connected world. Like, thought energy is real. And the feelings that we have about that thought energy is real. Sure. And so the experience of taking responsibility for how you want to live your life just extends naturally to, what if the lights went out? What if the water didn't work? And even when that happens, and has happened for millions of people all around the world, it's happening for people right now, even when that happens, that's a meaningless event. It's a neutral event. It's obvious. It's binary. The lights were on, now they're off. But what does that mean?
It's objective, but what is your subjective
What's your
experience?
subjective projection?
Yeah.
What's your subjective interpretation?
Yeah.
And that's where actively preparing from a place of peacefulness and even adventure turns that oh shit situation into a heck yeah, let's go, you know? And again, it does ultimately come back to, do you want to die in your sleep, or do you want a glorious death? Because if the thing happens that seems like a bad thing, you're probably on the I want to die in my sleep peacefully camp. But if the lights go off and you're like, oh yeah, here we go, then you're probably in the glorious death camp. And so the preparation part is just so fucking fun, because then you gamify what I think is like threading the needle of this particular time in history. Like it's like a whirlpool, like one cycle, took 10,000 years, and then it took 5,000 years, and then it took 2,000 years, and then it takes, and now it's like, we're at the final part of that little thing. Remember those, they're funnels sometimes in museums, but you put a quarter in, and it's and it just goes like this, and by the end the thing is horizontal, and it's just going like this, and boom, and then it's out, right? And I think that's where we're at, right? Totally. And so I think humans are, we're definitely, it's like we're being born into what we're going to become next, right? And there's I think a new speciation event that's coming. Speciation is a word that means when a species changes enough to be classified as a new species. And there have been 26 speciation events for humans in our understanding of recorded history, with Homo sapiens being the most modern, the freshest one. There's a lot of people who are aiming towards transhumanism and see transhumanism as the natural next speciation event. So you have jokers like, you all know of Harari and Musk and all those guys. And it's just like, that's cool. Have fun.
Maybe that's your choice. But that doesn't,
and you're free. Right. You're free to do that.
Right.
But let's back to make it even more practical. If the cycles are speeding up and the ability of our attention is being so strained and so stressed, and both intentionally and just consequentially, people's their focus is fractured.
Yeah.
And they can't hold the thought more than 3-4 seconds, but you're never not thinking. You're constantly thinking. So it's like, is your mind a laser, or is it, retarded kind of just like strobe light that, just like doesn't know what to do.
Pointing in every
direction.
Dude, yeah.
And meanwhile, you have the ability to focus. So coming at reality from a perspective of, I'm affecting reality and I'm being affected by reality, but the affect is happening inside of me.
Mm.
It's just a thing.
Yeah.
What do I want that thing to mean? Mm. And that's a very rare question that most of us don't think to ask.
Right.
What do I want it to mean?
Yeah.
Because that implies that it doesn't automatically mean something. Secondly, it implies that you're at choice with what you want it to mean.
Totally.
And so for the person who's, watching this, listening and going, just get to the calories, bro, get to the carbine part, it's like, that's cool. And you can go watch that anywhere.
Right.
But if you want the depth of context for understanding how and why to do this in a way that not only doesn't cost you your mental health, but increases your mental health like nothing else you can ever imagine, then that's the part we're getting into.
Amen. And that is precisely why I picked you for this topic rather than anyone else that I could have picked, man. Precisely why. Because that is the most important piece by far. The foundation from which you come to approach a topic of food storage and prepping and things like this.
Yeah.
It dictates everything.
It's everything. Yeah. And this is just a mirror for how everything else is happening. Right. It's like even before COVID and before all this other stuff, every generation thinks that the last generation had it better.
Right.
And every generation thinks the next generation is going to be dumber, stupid or weaker or whatever, which may be objectively true. But Plato was concerned about this new technology that was going to destroy the ability of the young Greek men and women to visualize and build these mental images of palaces. He was concerned about this technology that would destroy their ability to think. And it was reading.
Wow.
So this is not new.
Right.
Everybody thinks we're fucked.
You're right.
And we never are.
Right.
Or we are.
Right.
It depends which game you want to play.
Yeah. And that's just so important to understand the amalgamation of our thought energy too.
And so there's another part on this that if somebody, and this is a big part of our communities and the work that we do, is like Stephen Covey said it really well, begin with the end in mind. Mm-hmm. And so it's not uncommon in personal development and strategic growth circles to plan out, your vision and work your way back. But we take it a step farther I just ask people, if you could choose the day you're going to expire, your body's going to expire, when would you want that to be? And that by itself, if people are savvy to it and they're doing all the longevity shit and everything, then they're automatically they have a number and they're following people like Dave Asprey or Brian Johnson who know a lot and they're operating in a Newtonian worldview. And most of the people who are focusing on longevity are afraid to die. Brian Johnson literally has a t-shirt for his longevity conferences. It has 2 words on it. Don't die. And I'm like, you're not the dude I want coaching me on how to live a long, happy, fulfilled life. If the number one thing that kills people is stress, and that's the premise from which you're starting,
right,
you're screwed, man.
It's so funny you say that. I don't remember the guy's name, but I was scrolling on Twitter the other day and I came across this guy who says that he wants to live till he's 200. And then I was just looking at his like daily regimen, his nutrition, the supplements he's taking. I'm looking at all this. I'm like, fuck that, dude. If this is what you have to do to live to be 200, fuck that. That's not living.
No, it's avoidance.
It's avoiding to being 200. Like, it's not living. Like, he's so strict about everything that he does. Like, he won't do this, he won't do that, he won't do this, he won't do that. And like, obviously, if you listen to this show, you know that I'm very into natural health, right? Like, very into it, but I keep it pretty freaking simple, right? I'm like very into circadian biology and just terrain-based health and getting back to nature.
Right.
And that's the context by which I approach it, because I think that's what makes me the way that I see it, want to be human, to be feral, to be wild, to be a human being, while also playing with this technology that we're playing with, kind of balancing them out. And this,
but it's playing with
it's
it.
Playing.
That's the difference.
Exactly. It's playing through, that's living.
Well, and look at, you know, if a child has been thoroughly domesticated, overeducated, they can't function without an iPad.
Yeah.
You know, but then you take, you know, a kid who grows up on a farm or has, you know, all this time and no screens, they will invent a universe with a rock and a stick.
Yeah.
Their play is happening in here. They have this rich inner world that the rock or the stick is a part of, but they're not dependent on it.
Yes.
And that's why I really appreciate that you said, like, playing with all of this.
Yes.
Like, let's play, get prepared.
Yeah.
But we don't need to do that.
Right.
Like, we're just playing the game. And so the feeling of, let's say somebody is really worried about what's going to happen. The election's coming up. You know, December 5th is an auspicious date because of, you know, biblical and, you know, Hebrew writing. And what if there's an EMP on that day? Okay, what if there is? And what if there's not? I will prefer to see my life on the last day, which if you can think anything, like, why not think something that's cool? So I see a day where I'm 150 years old, and I don't know how it's going to happen, but I'm going to see it coming. And maybe I'm going to be skydiving naked off some, you know, helicopter in the Alps or something, or whatever. I mean, it doesn't matter. But this little blip in the early part of the 21st century, spice. This is just flavor for the memoirs, man. And so as I navigate through this vortex of speed that we're popping through, civilization's going to collapse. It already is. It's just the veneer hasn't worn off yet.
Yeah.
And so, like, the caterpillar has already become the butterfly. It's just still in the chrysalis. And so it kind of still looks like the butterfly or the caterpillar. And so that's what's happening right now.
Yeah.
So navigating through this period without getting derailed into the horror stories of machete wielding cartel members and sex trafficking and all this kind of stuff. Yes, that's real. It's always existed. It's always going to exist. Like, this is a
realm of duality.
It's a realm of duality. It's an expanding continuum.
Yes.
So the good is going to get gooder. The bad is going to get badder. And meanwhile, you're a choice with what are you going to give your focus to. So I project constantly past this weirdness. And I feel excited. Like, I think Austin's going to be the new capital of the Republic. I think the lines are going to be redrawn on the map. I think instead of having like 148 or however many lines, I think we're going to have thousands, because jurisdictions are going to be forced to compete on value.
Yes.
They won't be able to create this investment by force known as predatory taxation or just taxes. That all of it's cracking apart.
Yeah.
So when I add to my food supplies, when I get some range time in, which I'm very behind on, when I have conversations with people and we compare checklists and we're checking comms and we're running simulations, even if just verbal war games or like actual, like, hey, let's go ruck and let's go, you know, take a couple of days and let's just only have what we can carry. I'm doing all of that, A, for the sheer joy of doing it, B, because I want to be a good man and I want to be good at being a man, and because I already see past this shit where everything that's fake has been completely revealed, and it's going to be gnarly because so many people believe in things that aren't true. And so it's like, I was talking to somebody about this the other day, or maybe it was an interview. Imagine, because everybody believes in fairy tales, imagine like government or authority, you know, or an angry, passive aggressive God, you know,
right.
It's like they believe in all this bullshit
right.
that they learned from other people.
Yes.
Who are disconnected from themselves and their creator, and learn the only way they can have power is to create, to control others. Cool. Get it.
Yeah.
I've opted out of all of that. But imagine, because billions of people believe in fairy tales, including the fairy tale that they are not God. Like, people believe in weird shit.
Mm.
So imagine that you have like a stadium full of like 4 and 5-year-old kids, and it's Christmas Eve, and it's like the biggest Christmas Eve celebration ever. And these kids are all so excited for Christmas. And it's like the biggest slumber party in the world. And they can't wait to fall asleep and wake up. And there's this giant tree in the middle of the stadium, and just go with it. And right before they go to sleep, you give them all a bunch of like Jolt Cola. And then you give them sticks and rocks. And now they're all wired and they're all hyped up. And right when they're about as hyped as they can be, you tell them Santa Claus is not real. I think that's what we're heading into.
Right.
We're heading into a place, people are so destabilized, so stressed, so freaked out, and clinging to these belief systems for hope and safety and all this shit. What's going to happen when you find out not only is there no source of safety, the thing that you were told is a source of safety actually wants to fuck you.
Right.
And once you realize this, now you got some choices to make. And the powers that should not be, we talked about that last time, they're not afraid of revolution. They're not afraid of protests. They're not afraid of civil war. They love that stuff.
Mm-hmm.
What they're afraid of is indifference. They're just afraid of people going, no, I'm good, thank you.
Yeah.
Well, if you don't have the social credit score and the CBDCs and the vaccine and the QR code on your butthole, if you don't have that, then you can't go to school. Oh, so sorry. Oh, God. Oh, what will I do? You can't shop in our grocery store. Fuck your grocery store, man. Have you seen my farm? Have you seen my friends' places?
Right.
Get out
exactly.
of here. What else you have to threaten me with?
Yeah.
Oh, we're going to shoot you. Go for it, bro.
Yeah.
Go for it. You can't kill me.
Right.
This is just a body.
Right.
You can't kill me.
Yeah.
Good luck.
In nearly all cases with modern health systems, you're waiting months for appointments only to spend a mere 10 minutes with a doctor who quickly hands out a generic diagnosis that is likely rooted in a total misunderstanding of health and causes, and then you're offered a one-size-fits-all medication or invasive treatments with unpleasant side effects. If this sounds all too familiar, consider a different approach with the New Biology Clinic, founded by Dr. Tom Cowan, a respected natural health doctor, author, and speaker. Dr. Cowan's holistic perspective on health and wellness and a deep understanding of the true nature of health and disease sets this clinic apart. With the New Biology Clinic, it's not about quick fixes and suppressing symptoms. The practitioners take time to understand your unique story, recognizing that health is unique to the individual and that illnesses have a variety of causes, physically and metaphysically. Members of the New Biology Clinic enjoy a flat monthly fee that includes a range of valuable services like health consults as needed, practitioner-led live streams on diverse health topics, access to a members-only resource library, and multiple live group sessions every month. These sessions cover fitness, breathing integration, biofield tuning, guided meditation, EFT tapping, and much more. Unlike traditional healthcare systems that thrive on frequent visits, prescriptions, treatments, and suppressing symptoms, the New Biology Clinic's motivation is to make you healthy and keep you that way. Visit newbiologyclinic.com to learn more and use code THEWAYFORWARD for $50 off your account activation. If you're a member of The Way Forward, email hello@thewayforward.com to receive $150 off your account activation. Your journey to genuine healing begins here. It's funny you say that about the Santa Claus example with the stadium. As we're watching like Hollywood be exposed to where it's so incredibly obvious right now. We're watching geoengineering become so incredibly obvious right now. So many other things.
Like self-evident.
Self-evident. Like self-evident.
And many people still free to not see it because of the belief that no, that could never possibly happen.
Yeah.
Cool. You're free to believe that.
Right. 100%. And I think many of those people have such a strong self-identity around all of these things. But the point is
Yep.
that it's becoming so increasingly obvious, these things that so many of us already knew a long ass time ago, because so many people self-identify with it. And I do think at some level that, yes, we're in the midst of like this great unveiling, the veil is being lifted on all the things that are untrue. But some of that, in my opinion, is being expedited by the parasitic class, if you will, to some degree, because they want to just wreck everyone's foundational belief system.
Yes.
So their whole orientation of reality is just like fucking like this, just like you said with the kid's example of Santa Claus.
Yes.
Yeah.
There's a video that I did in, I'm going to get the date right here. It was, I think it was 2021. And I just went on this walk downtown and just ranted for like 26 minutes. And it was a Facebook Live, and there's a lot of people who are on there. And the video went on to get 540,000 views organically.
Wow.
And I was shocked because of the nature of this video. The video is titled Here, Piggy, Piggy. And it talked about how the premise was like, how do you trap wild hogs? You can't just set a trap. I mean, they're too with it, you know, they're too feral. So you set up a fence, you just put one wall up and you just put food by it. And then they just get used to that wall being there. And then you put another wall and then they just get used to that. And then you put a third wall and they get used to that. And once they're used to that and then they're eating, you just drop that fourth wall. No pun intended. And then you just end up trapping these hogs, but it has to be a stair-step process.
Yeah.
And so when we look at people who simply cannot believe that, you know, the powers that should not be don't have their best interests. And it's like, the more you look at it, the more you realize there are no powers that be. And so it's literally all made up.
Right.
And when you can just say, like, I mean, we've had this conversation hundreds of times, but like, I have a deep respect for the policy officers, the police officers who are putting on Kevlar to go feed their family every day. Like, respect, man. I can't imagine the stress that you have to go through. And I don't answer questions.
Both.
Like, the two are not mutually exclusive.
Exactly.
I can respect that you're feeding your family and you're doing the job that you were trained to do. I assume that you have a positive intent behind that job, and that's cool. And if you didn't have a positive intent, although I can't say that, man, I think everybody has a positive intent for everything they do, even if it doesn't make sense to them. But this do no harm, take no shit, it's infinite. Like, the amount not only of doing no harm, but the amount of good that we can do as human beings is, we're not even close to seeing what we're capable of. And the amount of harm that someone can intend to do to us, unconsciously or consciously, explicitly, implicitly, willfully or ignorant, that amount of harm is vast. So this idea of being not just self-reliant, deeply interdependent with people that are your allies and your friends and your family, but I always just come back to this vortex idea. And if we're threading the needle right now, and if all these old structures are collapsing, what's next? Like, what's on the other side of that? And I think that's when we're going to see, like, you know, all of Tesla's inventions, you know, it's like, poof, here we go. And how many other radical things, like, look at the architecture from like the 1800s or the 1600s. And look at the architecture today. It's like communists' wet dream, you know, it's just like,
fucking boxes that everyone hates.
It's incredible.
Exactly.
But all of it has to happen. Yeah. And so I actually don't think that there is a universal malice. I don't believe in that. I don't think there is a big evil force.
Yeah.
I think that goodness and harmony and expansion is the order of the day, and that humans can choose to do things to others or to themselves or to the planet that is completely selfish, self-serving, predatory, parasitic, etc. But still, that's just an event.
Right.
And then how does that help you define yourself?
Right.
So when all the mask stuff and the vaccines and mandates and all this shit happened in 2020 and 21, I wouldn't have gotten so excited about knowing the law if it hadn't been for that.
Yeah.
Then how can I help but have love for these parasites who, what a miserable existence. We talked about this on the last episode. It's like at the end of the day, at the end of this life, everybody's back in the spiritual green room. They're like, bro, man, you really took one for the team.
Right.
Like you were Hitler. Wow. How hard was that? You know?
Dude,
and it's
exactly.
like, I have love
Right.
for all of that, which makes the game of preparing and then teaching others. There are no contradictions in my philosophies.
Mm.
It's the exact same thing as, you know, learning to meditate and remember that you have thoughts, but you're not your thoughts. You have feelings, but you're not your feelings. You have a body, but you're not your body. Okay, then who and what are you? And why are you here? And what are you here to do? And how are you here to do it? And like get that clarity, and then everything else proceeds from there. So there's no difference in my experience between teaching somebody to make fuck tons of authentic money as a byproduct of their value and their existence, and then turning around and teaching them how to build their food library, how to count calories properly, which is not numbers of calories, but days of calories. Like to me, these are the exact same thing.
Yeah. Yeah. They're
Yeah.
not mutually exclusive.
No.
They're inextricably linked. Almost.
Exactly. And if, in fact, if one of them isn't there, now you're imbalanced.
Yeah.
Which is why all I mean, massive respect to anybody that puts a message out in the world, like you're doing it.
Yeah.
But the prepping mindset is so like, you know, it's just like so disconnected and so shut down. And I remember the first time I started going to you know, the range to shoot or different gun ranges, and I would walk in, I'd be like, "Ooh, wow, man, what a fucking thick frequency."
Yeah.
So I got into this routine where every time I would go either to the range or go buy ammo, or once in a while pick up a new piece, I would follow that with a trip to the crystal store.
To balance it out.
Yeah,
That's incredible.
and I would just load up on citrine and amethyst and all this kind of stuff. And you've seen the picture on my social media. You haven't been to my place yet.
I haven't. I need to come to your place.
I've got this big citrine like
I've
vessel.
seen that. Yeah.
And it's got 308 rounds and 9mm rounds and sometimes a pistol in it with a bar of silver and silver coins. And it's like, this makes me feel good.
Yeah. It's all of it.
It's all of it.
Yeah, man.
And one without the other is irresponsible.
Mm.
So you have to have both.
Yeah. And that, I mean, that goes back to what we were talking about with being able to hold both of these perspectives, being fully immersed in reality, while also understanding that you're infinite and eternal, both all at the same time, not disassociating along the sort of new age or the Christ is coming to save us so the world can end. I don't really care. I'm just praying. And then the other side, which, you know, Steiner talks about being ahrimanic, too focused on the physical reality itself. It's being able to hold both in balance. And that's what...
Which is why even I think last time we talked about that dude that broke into my house, and like he was there by divine appointment.
Yeah.
Like I invited him, and we invited each other into our realities so that our reality fields could merge and create this singular moment where I'm opening my door in a fucking $2 million house in a beautiful neighborhood, and there's a guy with a pistol pointing at my face. That had to happen. It was the perfect mirrored reflection of my frequency leading up to that point, and his. Otherwise, he couldn't be there. And so once that, and it's a big one for most people, but once you get into the understanding that there are no victims and there are no bad guys, everything else just becomes, I mean, it's such a level of chill. And ironically, or perfectly, that has an effect on the fields of people who might want to do you harm. But I mean, peace within, peace without.
Well, I say this every single episode, no matter what the topic is, it always ends up being that this particular quote is relevant. I mean, I just did an episode with Brother Truth on law.
Oh, yeah.
And we ended with this quote. So my good friend Eileen McCusick always says, strong coherent field overtakes and trains weaker incoherent fields, brings them into coherence.
Yep.
So that's what you're talking about right there. You're making yourself so strong and coherent that you're overtaking and training, bring into coherence the weak incoherent fields around you.
Yep. Well, and it's like when I was a bouncer, I would, see these guys that would, they've got a lot to drink. They're, not doing well socially that night anyway. And they're just like, fuck it, I'm just going to start a fight. And knowing that you have the skills to, especially if somebody's drunk, and especially, you got your buddies, and, it's like, you're not really in any danger, but it's still a social confrontation that has violence as a, more likely option. And just feeling that weird harmony where you just get that very calm, slow, quiet feeling.
Yeah.
And then all these other faculties show up of like, this is my brother. Like, he's just having a rough night. And I feel I feel more responsibility towards him because he's in such a fucked up state right now, that the last thing I ever want to do is to choke him out. And if I can know in the back of my mind that, okay, cool, and we don't have to go there, and I can accept enough responsibility for both of us to navigate through this situation where, he's all wild-eyed and he wants to, take a swing, and all of a sudden, I don't know where these words come from, but it's like, wait a minute, I think my mom knows your mom. And the guy's like, huh? I was like, yeah, I think they go to church together. And he's like, huh? And I said, what's your mom's name? And he's like, Deborah. I'm like, Deborah. Yeah. And where does she go to church? Holy Redeemer Lutheran. Holy Redeemer Lutheran. It's social engineering backed by the knowledge that you can choke this guy out. But because of that, you have extra responsibility to wield all these other skills to create peacefulness. And next thing you know, the guy's like, yeah, man, I haven't talked to my mom in a long time. And it's like, oh, bro, I feel you, man. And we hug it out, and next thing you know, he's apologized. Like, man, I was really drunk. It's like, I know. He's like, you were going to choke me out, weren't you? I'm like, nah.
You know what? It's so funny. Anytime someone online comes into the comments and is super combative and sort of feigning as a tough guy, and you know how they typically are behind the scenes, I have often said to these people, especially if they're my friends and I see my friends doing this, like especially there's a small subset of people on Twitter who are terrain-based health guys that are just the most combative guys ever. And I'm like, you know who the most dangerous person in a bar is? It's not the dude that's fucking yelling and screaming and making a big deal. It's the dude over there that has cauliflower ear that is completely chill. That's the most dangerous guy in a bar. You're making yourself look stupid. The guy who knows that he can be a weapon when he absolutely needs to as a last resort is the most dangerous guy in that bar by far.
And he's the most peaceful. Because he can afford to be peaceful.
Yeah. Loving and lethal.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
There's a quote, I think it was attributed to JFK. He who holds the winning hand must always play fairly. And when I began to understand how reactive most of us are, and that everybody's just reacting to other people's reactions, I began to really test this idea that I was at cause in how people were responding to me. And then I got into this whole time piercing thing and realized that I can look at somebody's face. It happened all the time when I was teaching martial arts. I would see these kids, and over time, these kids are growing up in martial arts. So I remember when they were like 4 years old as a white belt, and then it seemed like I blinked and now they're like 22 and they're running one of my schools, and I just still saw the same kid. And I began to have this experience where, and anybody can do it. It's just it's a perception choice. When you're talking to somebody, you can literally see who they were as a little boy or a little girl. And you can see them like on their last day and their last breath, and the eyes never change. The face changes, but the eyes don't change.
Yeah.
And when you can morph people's appearance like that, you realize you're just connecting to one slice of their soul's experience suspended in between all these infinite versions. And this particular finite version of you and I having this dialogue and people watching, this is a slice. Where it goes from here completely fractals out. And being in the place of like, you're good with yourself, you're good with life, you're at peace with whatever happens, and you are playing the game of being responsibly feral, which means get your food library up, get your defense sorted out, because you're human. Like, this is what I believe, how we're supposed to live. And that's how you break. It's a massive step to breaking out of the programming, where you see yourself as a victim. You see yourself as a product. You see yourself as a byproduct of your past and all this stuff. You see yourself as a pawn, as a cog in the machine. Yeah, that may be somebody's lived reality, but it doesn't have to be.
Right.
And the moment somebody starts to break out of that, it's a little discombobulating. It's kind of destabilizing. But on the other side of that period is, like, you literally feel like a kid, man. Like, you just feel like a kid. And the energy that you access, that vital life force energy, is, I was hanging out with somebody the other night. It was turning out to be a very late night, and we were having a lot of drinks, and the philosophy was just flowing. And a young guy, 33. And he was like, "How old are you?" I was like, "I'm 50. And he was like, "What?" He's like, "My dad just turned like 58 or whatever." And he was like, "He's nothing like you." I said, "Well, of course not. Like, we all have our individual thing."
Right.
I, according to science, probably shouldn't have the health and energy and vitality that I do, because I, during various periods of my life, will experiment with lots of stuff. There's periods of my life I smoke like a chimney,
Right.
drink like a fish, sleep 2 hours a night, and teach 8 hours the next day. How do you explain that?
Right.
It's not a prescription, but it's a description
Right.
of when you're connected to your purpose. And I'm not saying like, "Oh, I'm so connected to my purpose," but when you are, you're doing improv with life, and life rewards that like crazy. So being in this peaceful mode of, I just want to be responsible and have food, have comms, have security, have land, all that could go away today. Bring it. Like, I'm not here for a long time unless I am. I'm here for a good time.
Starts here first, and then it expands outward.
Man.
So what does that look like for you, though, in terms of expanding outward? What is your philosophy, your approach to prepping? And that's a rhetorical question, because I already know the answers, and I love it. And that's what I want to get into now.
Yeah.
But what I love about you is you focus on tailoring it towards the unique needs of that individual, given the context of their life and what they're trying to create and the area they're in, et cetera, et cetera. So,
yeah. When I'm teaching prepping, just like working with any client or any student, you have to get a full landscape of where they're at. And the mark of a great teacher isn't how much they know, it's their ability to meet the student where the student's at.
Yeah.
And so if somebody is brand new to this and has just been absorbing headlines, and then they spend some time on some prepper channels and now they're freaking out, I would coach them or consult them very differently than somebody who came from a rural background, grew up, slaughtering and processing chickens and hunting for their own meat. Like, there was just a different landscape. The way that I have approached it is pretty pragmatically, and just looking at the math, assuming that there is no infrastructure. And so I just start with, relative worst case scenarios, and assume there's no power, there's no water, there's no food, there's no communications. And whether that's because of an EMP, a solar flare, a nuke, virus, cyber attack, combination, whatever, I just will run simulations on the situation. So assume there's none of that. So what do I really need in order to move my life through this period? And they're all connected, so it's not like there's a hierarchy, because if you only have one or two, you're done.
Right. If you only have bullets,
right,
and water,
right,
that's not enough.
It's not enough.
Yeah.
And so I'm gonna rattle off a bunch of things. They're all connected. I believe they're all equally important, and I'm sure there's things that I'm missing, and there may be things that are redundant or not necessary. But in my awareness, this is what's most useful. Having shelter and knowing that the place that you're in is a place that you can hang out for a while. And that looks like different things for different people. For me, it looks like two approaches. One is completely as off the radar as possible while being still convenient for my day-to-day life. So I have a property that's 45 minutes outside of downtown. If downtown got nuked, that's probably going to include my property, at least, functionally. But it's not so far away that my usual daily life is interrupted, because then it would affect my life.
Mm.
And so 45 minutes was a sweet spot. The land is completely raw. And there's nothing built on. We have like one pump house, and that's it. It's completely raw. It's at the end of the end of the end of the end of a road. And I don't want to say too much more, but there's the biggest concern that I would have if shit really hit the fan would be there's probably a bunch of meth heads, that are within a few minutes away.
All right.
But so what? It's like flavor. So that's one scenario, is to have a complete bug out where there's people that know me and that know where the place is and know that they are completely on their own, but they can be on their own on my place, and we'll be on our own together, because there's no shelter, there's no food, anything. So we'll be basically camping. It'll be the rest of the the rest of the infrastructure, food, water, medical, defense, that is already established.
Mm-hmm.
And the people that, this is another huge part, is people. To think that somebody is going to Mad Max it is retarded, in the literal sense of the word. Dumbed down, held back, like it's just not going to happen. And it's very romanticized and demonized at the same time. When you see somebody who's a one-man army, they're glorified in Hollywood, but in real life would be completely canceled,
right,
and demonized, like, oh, you can't do that.
Yeah.
So that's also part of the mind games.
Totally.
But that would be one scenario, would be a complete bug out, in place, as invisible as possible. And we can do some more checklist items on that. But the other is deeply connected in community with people who have a better infrastructure, who I am an asset for, where knowledge, skills, ability to man a station, whatever that station is. I don't have any ego put in leadership. I can lead if I need to lead. I can follow if it makes sense to me. And as long as that cohesion is there, that's kind of how we should be living anyway.
Right.
So that would be like another day in the park.
Yep.
As far as the practical, tactical, tangible pieces, food and water, it is a multi-million dollar industry that sells to people and caters to people who are very Western, late stage capitalism. I can solve my life's biggest problems with one click. And then the solution shows up the next day. Exactly. I almost wore a shirt today that says dopamine on it. And it's one of my favorite shirts.
Perfect for this.
Yeah.
Especially for the people who are brand new. Literally perfect for that.
So that's something I saw and I observed in myself, where I felt the dopamine flush after going to, the store and loading up. I went to Whole Foods. I was in it. I was like, I'm allowing myself to get into a prepper trance and assume that tomorrow the lights are going out. And I kind of like the way that feels, just as a different form of thinking. So I'm in Whole Foods, which I'm a very spoiled prepper apparently. And I'm loading up tuna and beans and bags of beans and all this kind of stuff. And I end up with this shopping cart, and people started to look at me funny. And I'm just like, just pushing my cart. But it was a unique experience because I'd never done that before. The danger of that kind of stuff is that you feel like you've accomplished a big thing. And it's very important to zoom way out and see how this one step might fit into a larger simulation or might fit into a larger plan. Yeah. So I found the greatest peace of mind and what I believe would be the most or a practical approach, which is keeping all of these purchases balanced out. So if it's food, then you measure calories. You don't measure numbers of calories, you measure days. So 1 million calories per person per year is the rough estimate. It's not a lot, but it's certainly enough to survive off of. Yep. And if you break that down, it's about $27.50 per day. Then now you have a food library. And now you can just start adding to your food library. And If you're organized, you've got an expiration date, expiration calendar, which is kept in a waterproof, zip closed binder. And all you do is just set a reminder on your phone. And if the phone's out, then you'll probably be eating your food, so you'll be fine. But if you've got a reminder and the calendar thing comes up, it reminds you to cycle out the things that are close to expiration and either consume them or donate them, and then refresh your supply. So it's very simple. You can just have this rolling stock that's constantly growing, and that by itself feels fucking great.
Yeah.
Like you just have the sense of like, I am one step further removed from, and this is very Darwinian, but you know, the joke about the two hikers in the woods. So the two hikers in the woods, and they've got their hiking boots on and backpacks, and all of a sudden they see bear scat, and then they keep walking, and then they see these claw marks on this big tree, and then they smell bear, and they stop, and one guy sits down and takes off his boots, opens his backpack, puts his boots inside, pulls out a pair of running shoes, starts putting his running shoes on. And his buddy is like, bro, you're crazy. You can't outrun a bear. He ties his shoes up. He says, I don't have to outrun the bear. I just have to outrun you. So I can't say that that's not also a part of my thinking, because understanding, going back to the inability of most of our minds to grasp the realities of violence. We've been so conditioned by Hollywood. And even if you read like Cormac McCarthy, The Road, which is a very intense read, it's still externalized. And there's still all of these assumptions about how things might happen. The reality is, and this is a reality which I've not experienced, the reality is that when somebody goes, it's different for everyone, but generally 9 meals is the consensus, then your moral framework begins to erode.
Yeah.
And after a few more meals, you no longer have a human value system. And you go a little bit longer, you are a mouth, a stomach, and a brain. And so it just becomes not soulless.
Primally, though. Just very primal.
Very primal.
That imagination is off, or that imagination, if anything, is oriented back to its primal nature of how do I get food by any means.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yes. And so if that were to happen, in many cases in the world where it has happened, literally there are no social bonds anymore. Right. And this is very grim, but if anybody studies the Holodomor, which is the Stalin created famine that killed anywhere between 6 and 20 million Ukrainians, depending on the stats. They had to put signs up in the villages reminding people that it was against the law to eat dead family members.
Yeah,
like our brains are not equipped to handle that.
Right.
We watch zombie movies and horror movies all day long, but you spend a couple minutes on that, it's like. It's a whole different reality, which is where having a spiritual perspective that can make sense out of that is essential.
Yeah, man.
But knowing that if that were the case, and there's no more food, there's no more water, there's no more certainly electricity. If that's the extreme situation, then my highest intent would be to have enough time for whatever natural cycles are going to play out. And to me, living in a bunker wouldn't make sense because of the whole glorious death, peaceful death thing. Like, no, like I'm not going to be in a fucking bunker.
Yeah.
But knowing that, again, extreme situation, cities are the worst place to be. Right. Suburbs, second worst. Exurbs, third worst. Rural, best if you've got food, water, and community. So to make it more practical for somebody watching this, you got to check in with yourself and see, what do you think is a likely scenario? And why do you think that? If you think that there's going to be an EMP any second now because you read 1 second after, and that's what you're convinced is going to happen, then you have to orient your actions towards that. But you also have to ask, why do you believe that? Did you believe that prior to reading this book? Or did the book hook your attention and now you believe this is going to be the thing? Maybe chill out a little bit before you go shopping.
Right.
But the basic idea of being prepared, food, water, power, communication, defense, like it's freely available. One of these buckets, which will cost somebody, $30, $40.
Narrate to the people listening.
Oh yeah. So this is, I'm not sponsored by anybody. But this is a brand called Mountain House. This is the Adventure Meals bucket, trademarked Adventure Meals, freeze-dried classic meal assortment, no artificial colors, no artificial flavors. There are 12 pouches, 3 beef stew, 3 beef stroganoff with noodles, 2 granola with milk and strawberries, 2 spaghetti with meat sauce, and 2 chicken fried rice. The calories on these, not bad. Beef stews, 210, 290, etc. The ingredients list is all there. What does crack me up a little bit is the expiration date on these things, and you've got your ReadyWise there.
Yeah.
The expiration on this, best used by February 2054.
Wow.
But there's the dopamine.
Yeah, there's the dopamine.
And
exactly. That's
why not?
right. Exactly.
Like, why not have it?
Because this is what you brought up with these sort of waterless, let's say, meals that are sitting in front of us. That is the dopamine hit, like that are, when people think of prepping, they automatically think of something like this, right? Yep. Especially because that's what fills their Amazon search results, et cetera, et cetera. But then you have to start thinking in terms of water too.
Yes.
And how much water these meals require, if not to create, but also to digest, because they are so dry and void of actual nutrients.
And your body, I mean, you more than anybody know about water, and having a water source is critical.
Yeah.
But also having water storage, and if it's 1.5 gallons per adult per day, and that's being very conservative, then go to your calendar and just ask yourself, how many days of water would you like to have?
Yeah.
And so, stacking some 5-gallon jugs in your garage is very easy to do. Yeah. If somebody didn't do that and they're remembering this podcast, the day that the lights go out or power, is a storm hits or whatever, first thing they should do is fill up their bathtub, fill up their sinks, do not flush your toilet, get ready to go to the bathroom outside, make sure that you are well downwind, downstream of any kind of food, water source. These are basic things. And a little bit of advanced thinking, I don't mean advanced like complex, but like thinking in advance, goes a long way. But what all this does is it gives you a time window, or it gives you a time runway. And so stacking water, stacking food, having a variety of ingredients, and if especially for this audience, having supplementation, having the right minerals, having whatever else you feel is going to be, necessary for you. But I think people really overestimate what they would be capable of at the early onset of any kind of crisis. They overestimate, I'll be ready and all of this. But they severely underestimate what they're actually capable of over the long term.
Yeah.
There's a great book by Gavin de Becker called The Gift of Fear. And in it, he talks about intuition, and specifically fear, as an advantage, a creative advantage. And he tells multiple stories in his books, The Gift of Fear and Protecting the Gift, which is for parents. Phenomenal book for parents. But he talks about multiple scenarios where someone was attacked. And these are just like, one woman was like, I think like a nurse in her late 20s, and some guy flipped out and came after her, was like trying to stab her. And she defended herself incredibly well with zero skills, no fight training, no background.
Yeah.
And in her retelling the story later, she said, I just knew what to do.
Yeah.
Holy shit, man.
Yeah.
Like, so all this prepping stuff, that's cool. But ultimately, I do think it comes down to, I don't want to just say your faith, but resources are always at hand. And the more you trust yourself, and the more you trust your creator, or however that plays out for people's belief systems, like, you're always going to be okay. And so worrying in advance and filling yourself with that stress right now, seems not a good idea.
Mhm.
Playing the game 2020, I thought, you know what? I've been to Burning Man 8 times. What if I just act like I'm going to go to Burning Man for 5 years?
Mhm.
All right. Well, wow, that just reframed it for me. And now I'm good.
Right.
Like costumes are going to be lit, you
Yeah.
know, it's just like, so let's go, you know, and it brings a levity to the whole thing.
Yeah.
And I really think that it's just so simple to do the tactical part.
Yeah.
Like it's literally, you know, an extra 30 minutes a week
Mhm.
of just kind of adding this to your thinking, building your food library, building your water supplies, familiarizing yourself with generators, with alternate power sources, find where there's water, think as abstractly as possible, which means you have to think unlike everybody else is probably thinking.
Right.
And I had to go through that. I still go through it. When I think of an idea like, oh, I immediately mark that thought as not mine.
Mm.
That I'm tapping into the collective idea of what people say they would do.
Mm.
And I automatically know it's a bad idea.
Wow.
Like the people are like, oh, just go out and hunt. I'm like, well, A, you've never hunted in your life.
Right.
B,
And how many other people have that exact same
Yeah.
mindset? Or I'll just go to that river down the street. Like
Right.
if
Yeah,
I don't
you
have
and
water in
everybody
my
else.
house. Yeah.
Meanwhile, watch any National Geographic watering hole video.
Right.
And you see what goes down to the watering hole.
Yeah.
Like crocs and lions. Like you don't want to be there.
Right.
So automatically, unless somebody has an extensive background in bushcraft, survival, self-reliance, off-grid community living, unless that's their background and that's their lived experience, most thoughts that you have are not yours. They were planted there, programmed there. You're picking up on these thoughts. The people that say, oh, I would just go out and hunt. I'm like, okay, you and 7,000 other people.
Right.
So after 2 weeks, there's no more game.
Right.
Or is there?
Or is there? Right. Or is there?
Yeah.
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 Picking up what you're putting down there.
Yeah.
Yep.
And so it's very important to think through these scenarios from a spiritual groundedness, whatever that means for somebody, seeing past this temporary issue, which I fully accept might never happen.
Right.
And I'm totally down with that. Like, I don't have a need for this to happen. It won't fulfill some part of my mission in life to make it through the great, you know, EMP famine, Venezuelan cartel attack of 2026. You know, it's like, I don't need that to happen.
Right.
I'm quite good with it not happening. What I do believe is necessary is for like a lightning strike in a forest to burn out the undergrowth. Like humans learn way more from pain than we do from pleasure.
Totally.
And so
Totally.
we've been so protected and so domesticated and so intentionally weakened and softened, but nature is like, hold my kombucha because here you go. Like there has to be some sort of, you know, crazy kind of conflict. To think that will never happen is weird to me.
Yeah.
This idea, Rudyard Lynch talks about it on his YouTube channel, What If Alt Hist. I agree with a lot of his stuff. A lot I see differently, but this idea of infinite progress is like, well, probably not.
Mm-hmm.
You know, that just can't keep expanding forever.
Right.
But it does breathe, and there's always this.
Well, that's why you look back to this architecture from previous,
right,
you know, centuries, right? And like that indicates to me an advanced civilization across the world that got to a certain point and then needed to contract. It's expansion, contraction, contraction, coming in cycles and flows.
Exactly.
And are we on the precipice of one now? I don't know. I feel like there is some sort of thing happening related to that. I think most people do.
Everybody can feel it.
Everyone.
And I've begun playing with this thought recently that, like, again, I can only speak subjectively. I think I live in heaven.
Mm-hmm.
Like I'm driving up here today from my place downtown, and I'm just on the road and I'm just seeing all these people living their lives, and it's a beautiful day, and I'm stoked to see you and rock out this dialogue. And then I'm kind of thinking about, man, the last couple of days have been really beautiful. And I'm just like in this like sort of, oh man, what a life. Like, fuck, this is great. And I'm also completely open to the thought or the idea, and this is what's been coming in the last couple of days, that what I'm living right now might be the worst that it's ever going to be moving forward.
Mm.
That what I think is heaven right now, with all of its sparks of pain and this immense capacity to love, all of that, I might look back on that a year from now, this time, and go, oh, poor kid. Like, fuck, man, you were really, God, the world was such a fucked up place compared to what's possible. And so if you can think about anything, it at least makes sense to mix in thoughts where, what if it doesn't have to be, good or bad? What if it could be awesome or fucking awesome?
Yeah.
It's like, which one do you want? And if we're writing the menu, which I think we are, then I like thinking about the fact that I might look back 6 months from now, a year from now, 3 years from now, and look at this exact time, as good as it is, I might look back on it as like a bad trip. Like, oh God, that was so intense.
Right.
God, do you remember that? We had all this radiation and we had all this, these puppets, politicians. God, do you remember that? Oh my God, it was so crazy. But we're thriving.
Yeah.
And I would suggest that anybody who has the means with which to even hear our words right now, you got nothing to really complain about.
Right.
Like, if you've got the material ability to hear these words, if you've got a level of material wealth or connection that's let you watch this video or listen to these words, and you have a brain that can understand these words, and you've got a body with which to feel or reject the truth or bullshit of whatever somebody thinks, like, what more do you need?
Mm-hmm.
Like, you're a fully functioning human being.
Right.
And you're telling a story in every second of your life. So might as well make it a good one.
Oh, beautifully said, man. Beautifully said, man. I want to ask a couple more things about this, like in terms of the practicality. So what is your general perspective on food like this, especially as it relates to, dare I say, contrasting with things like honey, things like beans and rice and things like that, especially as it relates to water storage? And before we get there, I want to touch on the water piece first off, because I'm obsessed with water, as you know, and researching it, but also because 1.5 gallons per adult per day in an emergency or, apocalyptic scenario may seem like, wait, I don't drink 1.5 gallons of water a day. So what are you talking about? And you're not thinking ahead for a circumstance like that. It's not about just drinking the water. It's about being able to bathe with it. It's about being able to cook with it. It's about being able to clean with it. It's about being able to, depending on the circumstance, use that for some, using the bathroom, so to speak, like bowel movements, et cetera, et cetera. So it's more about that. That's why it's 1.5 gallons of water per day. So that's like thinking ahead. How much time do you think that you need based on your circumstances and what your thought energy is thinking could happen in any future scenarios, right? Understanding that it's an amalgamation of thought energy, especially of the people in around your vicinity. But then when it comes to food, again, everybody goes towards these ReadyWise meals and adventure meals. It's such a funny name, adventure meals. But what is your general perspective on those?
I think that they are useful, especially for somebody starting out, to activate that feeling of self-reliance.
Yeah.
Like,
and maybe that's it.
Yeah. I mean, buy a few of these, notice how good it feels, or not. I mean, you're having your own journey. For me personally, these make up a very small percentage of the actual food stores that I have. And so I've got several different catches where I've got food. Obviously the more natural, the better. Yeah. And the thing about dry grains, so beans, all forms of beans, lima beans, pinto beans, garbanzo beans, black beans, red beans, kidney beans,
soybeans.
No, not my thing. It's funny. I
had to.
I got it just after you said that, but I'm like, no.
It's so funny that it was like an instant no. No, ew.
No,
like,
why would I do
I'm
that?
not a fucking soy boy. You kidding me? That was too good.
That was hilarious. And then rice, all forms of rice, and then grains like wheat berries. You can buy a 50-pound bag of wheat berries, store it in cool, dry storage, and you can mill it. You can plant it. Like, I'm down for having wheatgrass during the apocalypse,
Yeah.
you know? And so it's like sprout that, grow it. It's amazing. You mentioned honey. It's like a fucking superfood.
Yeah.
Like it's so good and it keeps forever.
You talked about in the pyramids, they found honey.
Yeah.
That's still edible.
Yes. It's like mind blowing.
Yeah.
Incredible. Salt, so much salt. Like salt is so underrated, or underestimated. The word salary comes from the word salt.
Really?
Because Roman centurions were paid in salt.
Oh, wow.
That was the currency. So, wow. I mean, it's an electrotransmitter. Our brains need it. Our bodies need it. You see animals start to go crazy when they don't get salt. So, yeah, I mean, I've got so many 5-gallon buckets of salt. It's not even funny. And you Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah. I do have, and this is just sort of general life philosophy. I am very happy to say I have a mongrel constitution, like absolute, like Wolverine level healing powers. I can eat anything. I cannot eat. I can do whatever. And I have a relationship with my body where I understand my body is much more wave than particle, and it's responding to the thoughts and the emotions that I have. So I don't care if it's like Celtic sea salt or if it's Morton's, you know, it's like, I don't have time for that. Right. You know, I'm not going to get into it. But that's me. If somebody really,
that's medicine for other people though, because that can be cultivated.
Yeah.
That can absolutely be cultivated.
100%. Well, that's, I mean, one of the things that is prevalent in a lot of my courses and programs is, we do this meditation where it's body talk.
Yeah.
And you talk to your cells, but you talk to your cells like the coach of a winning team.
Mm-hmm.
And you're the coach and your cells are the team. So it's like, you're like telling them good job and telling them what you want them to do. Anyway.
Love that.
But so having dry, raw goods is so far superior to this freeze-dried stuff. But this is a good on-ramp. Having a freeze-dried thing, especially if somebody's not used to thinking in terms of preparation, buying a can of beans, a bag of rice doesn't really feel different than what you might normally do.
Right.
But you buy food that expires in 2054, it checks a little different box and it opens. Next thing you know, you're buying flashlights. And next thing you know, you're buying a generator. Next thing you know, you're buying
like a gateway
20-acre farm, apparently. But yeah, it's a gateway.
Yeah.
And so, but it is a drug. So you have to be careful not to rely exclusively on that. Same thing with defense. Same thing with energy. Like if this is going to be a lifestyle, then it has to be a lifestyle that's a natural extension of an existing value system, not a replacement of your value system. Otherwise you're going to screw yourself over. Dry goods, canned goods are, you know, in that order. Nothing ever will beat, apocalypse or no, nothing will ever beat live, raw, living foods. So that means making friends with people who have the means of production, figuring out in advance what's the value exchange that you're gonna have with them. And I think it's a good idea anyway, regardless of what happens, to have a non-monetary system. Or if it is money, then it's lawful money, gold and silver.
Yeah.
But barter is so alien to us in this society. Right. And yet, like, humans have been around a lot longer than money has. So I think that would probably be a good experiment for people, you know, just to see, you know, what value do you bring and what value do you need?
Yeah.
And to begin to have that conversation in general. And then in terms of your own, not just procurement of food, but your own production of food, it's hard to grow enough food to feed a family.
Yeah.
It's hard. But once you accept that it's hard and you accept that this is what it would look like, well, then it becomes simple.
Yeah.
Maybe not easy, but it becomes simple.
Yeah.
Because it's a math problem and it's a solvable math problem. So you're looking at space, you're looking at quantity, you're looking at quality, you're looking at variety. And then it's like, cool. Well, is this a part of my life that I want to incorporate now because it's healthy and useful and just a cool way to live? Or is this something that freaks me out too much and I just want to buy a bunch of these buckets, cool. Like you just have to constantly check in with yourself.
Right. Not everyone has to be a farmer. That's the thing. Like not everyone has to have a garden in their backyard. But in my opinion, at some level, I think you either need to do a damn good job of befriending people who are doing that, or at the very least, grow at least a little bit in your space. Even if you have an apartment balcony, like, and you don't have friends, again, that's the asterisk I would put there.
Yeah.
If you don't have friends who are growing food, be the one who does. Be the one who does as best you can. And if you have friends who are growing food and you know that you have a deal like, hey man, if shit hits the fan, we're cool. Like I got this skill to bring forth to the community. I have this tool, this resource, whatever it is, both of these things, you will provide me food. Cool. Yeah, we have that agreement. Great. Set that up. That's all it requires. And if not, then fucking grow as much as you can in your space. And so much can be done in such a small space, especially if you adopt permaculture principles.
And exactly. And that being said, the amount of people that I heard and still hear to this day who say, well, I got this vertical hanging, garden for my apartment. I'm like, you will eat that and you could grow for 2 months and you will eat it all in one day.
Right.
And so like it's like similar to how our minds are ill-equipped to think about violence. We're ill-equipped to think about feeding ourselves at scale.
Totally.
Like at personal scale.
Yeah.
But I agree with you on that people should grow because it teaches you. And once it's like another gateway. Once you take some alfalfa seeds or wheat berries and you sprout them and you eat the sprouts, your brain naturally will connect to the next biggest thought, which is, well, what if I had a whole tray of these? Yeah. Which is, well, then what if I had a whole room of these? Right. And then what if I put the walls? And I wonder if I could do the ceilings. And next thing you know, you're further down the road to self-reliance. And then you start thinking tangential thoughts that are connected to the knowns. And you start thinking, well, I wonder if I could have a chicken. Mm-hmm. And then, I mean, now you're really in this harmony of life and you're doing this stuff because it's fun. Yeah. And it's like, I mean, I have so much respect for the people that do grow their own food. I'm as far removed from it as possible.
But that's the point is you have, how many people do you know that are?
Yeah. Yeah. Well, and that's, I mean, shout out to our farm team and to Darren at Freedom Farms, because like he's living out there and he's running everything. And we've got, Zach and a
fucking love Darren. I love Darren and Zach. Yeah. Awesome dudes.
Yeah.
Awesome dudes.
Well, and what they're doing out there is we're taking a very long view. I mean, we've got fruit trees and nut trees and, this is going to be generations that are going to be benefiting from this. Mm-hmm. Immediately, it's a great space. Clients are going out there, friends are coming out, and we're singing songs by the campfire, and then we're shooting, and then we're doing these little missions and having fun and just playing, just having a good time. And there's a garden, and we've got pigs, and we have chickens in rotation. And as an entrepreneur, I have learned enough about specialized exchange to know I'm not the guy to go out there and grow the food. I could learn, and I am learning as we go, but my mission and my work is elsewhere.
That's the thing. Are you best served elsewhere?
Yeah.
Yeah, that's my point. And that's my point from the very beginning is like, not everyone has to be the farmer. Like not everyone has to specialize in growing food, even in an apocalyptic scenario.
Right.
You just need to have had those conversations with people.
Yep.
If you are orienting your life to prepare and be as totally self-reliant or interdependently reliant with community as you possibly can, have those conversations with other people and say, hey, I'm not growing food, you are, but I bring this to the table if shit hits the fan.
Right. Well, and that's really, again, I think it's going to be a beautiful opportunity for people to really connect to their purpose, because in 2020, I did a thought experiment online for one of my courses, and I called it Dunbar's Island. And so I made up this simulation where Dunbar's number 150 is the
150 like of a community, right? Like that's the what human beings are best fit to have in their vicinity of people they know.
And it's it's been debunked. It's been reproven. So
I think it makes sense. Like, especially if you look in terms of governance, like if we want things to be decentralized for those in the freedom movement, what makes most sense is governance on a 150-person level.
That's it. And then you can be intellectually and creatively decentralized, but in terms of survival and security and sustenance,
this 150 popular people.
So I did this thought experiment called Dunbar's Island, and the premise was that you're on an island. You are one of 150 people. There are raw materials on the island for everybody to thrive, but nothing exists in its finished form. What do you bring to the table? And it was, especially for a lot of my audience back then, less now, but back then a lot of my audience was very, very spiritual, very drawn to healing and to this message of safety and like you're perfect exactly as you are. And it was confronting for a lot of people when they're sharing in the group that, I do tarot card readings. I'm like, fucking great. Like, you're going to die. Like, I hate to tell you, but you're going to die.
That's useful now. I'm not going to like disagree
now
with that.
It's useful.
Right. Yeah. But when that
now
comes,
it's
like,
cool.
Dude, you
but
better.
We're starting over.
I'm a tarot card. I do tarot card readings, and I also am trained in marksmanship.
Right. Now we're talking.
Right.
If you can hit that tarot card 100 yards with a 308 and put that fucking...
You can zero on a tarot card.
If you can put that bullet through the Page of Cups at 100 yards, you're on my team. Yeah. And you can go read the card later.
And interpret what it means with a hole in it.
Then you can interpret what it means. But it was confronting for a lot of people as they started to realize, oh, I'm totally domesticated. And if we go all the way back down to the bottom of Maslow's hierarchy, I'm a liability. Fun, I think it's fun. Interesting segue. There's a female friend of mine who's a phenomenal dating coach and very, very good in relationships, teaching relationships. And we were hanging out a couple months ago, and she was telling me, and she doesn't live in the U.S. She's I don't want to call her out, but she's European, beautiful, very, very pragmatic. And we were just talking about dating and relationships, and she just tells me, she's like, Jesse, I find myself, if I'm with a man and I feel that he's weak, that I want to kill him. And I was like, makes sense to me.
Primal thing.
Yep. Yeah. And she was like, what does that say about me? And I was like, well, you have a daughter, and your biology knows that if shit hit the fan and this guy's weak, that he's a liability, which means he's a threat to your daughter and you. Yeah. Maybe not directly, but you would have to protect him and protect against whatever the threat is. Of course you want to eliminate the threat, like at a biological level. So looping all the way back to the very beginning of the conversation today, what does it mean to be a good human? Like, to be good at being a human. And so all of these, whether it's higher functioning or just luxury functioning of like, what kind of bread are you on Facebook? You know, it's like, okay, cool. Or what are your gene keys? Or what's your human design? Or what's your Stein? Or this or that? Nice. That's awesome. And if it creates value, great. But if that's all you've got, I think there may be a very strong chance to upgrade very quickly and find out who you really are.
Yeah.
Outside of the intellectual, spiritual, metaphysical pursuits. Because I've never experienced anything, aside from a few near-death experiences, I've never experienced anything more practically spiritual than a no-rules fight.
So crazy that's where you're going. I mean, it's not that crazy knowing you, but that's exactly what I thought in my mind. Like that's why I love sports in general, and especially combat sports. Like, because you learn so much about yourself in those instances. Yeah. More than you ever would.
Yeah. And I think that we are due as a species, and just in terms of cycles, we are due for a return to reality. Yeah. And I think that that's a big part of what's driving a lot of this narrative. Like that video that I made on Facebook, Here Piggy, got 540,000 views because it talked about the bifurcation of society. That there's 2020 and let's get everybody on Zoom. It worked. It's fantastic.
Yeah.
And then what's next? What's next? Well, why not the full-on metaverse?
Right.
And what's next after that? Well, if we've got UBI and they're just printing it, I mean, they're printing it now anyway, but if you have a central bank digital currency that is not only connected to your social credit score, but how, like in the Matrix, people need some kind of meaning.
Yeah.
So why not just incentivize people to play games all day and harvest their adrenaline and their pheromones and on an energetic level, harness that. And why not have somebody just like playing games with their Neuralink, and if their adrenaline gets really high, they get some extra Fed coin.
Yeah.
You know, and then if their dopamine goes really high, they get some more Fed coin. And if their serotonin goes really high, they get some more Fed coin. And they're just like these, you know, human chemical factories. Cool. Have fun.
Right.
And meanwhile, your soul is like, fuck. Oh, damn it.
That ain't it.
Damn, it should not have gone into that pig pen.
Right.
Or not. You know, your soul is just like, oh wow, cool. I'm
maybe I'm relaxing this incarnation, and like that's which sounds fucked to say.
Yeah. Well, and it's like, I mean, I think the soul's playing all the lives at once. And so this is just like adding a little bit extra flavor.
Good point.
But then if the bifurcation is like that, and one side is completely digitally, they won't even think they're enslaved any more than a house cat thinks it's a slave.
True.
Well, a house cat might, but dogs don't.
Right.
Dogs are happy to have somebody feed them and pet them and take care of them.
Yeah.
But they're just dependent, and that's no problem. So for the domesticated humans who want to be pets, great. You can be a service human, you know, and you can just wear the special vest and you're like certified, you know, great.
Right.
Have fun.
Yeah.
And even like, you know, the pigs on our farm, like Darren and Zach say, they have one bad day. You know, the rest of their life is actually beautiful. So I'm not saying that that's actually even worse. You'd have to put a bullet in my brain before I played that game.
Yep.
But for the people who choose that, consciously or unconsciously, go for it.
Right.
But I think the alternative, and the word alternative is so interesting. It's just a different native. It's the altered native. It's just like you're parallel.
Yeah.
So the alternative to all of this other, you know, digital bifurcation is a return to harmony with nature, knowing where your food came from, knowing the farmer that created the food or grew the food. This is what's been a lot of fun, is thinking entrepreneurially about the problems that are going to be facing people and how to solve them profitably in a co-creative sort of equitable way. And let's say energy is a big deal. Well, the resources are there, but then how do you turn that into a service? And I had sketched out this whole business plan for, in the old days, they would deliver milk to your front porch. Well, you just sign up, you have an app, it's on a local mesh network, and you've got a battery bank. You don't have to have solar panels. When you get down to 40% or 30 or 50, whatever your preferences are, then a notification goes to the company that has a solar farm, and all the solar farm does is just charge deep cycle batteries. And then you get a notification, and the drivers go out, or you can opt in like Uber, and you can be an energy delivery person.
Dude, this is an idea.
Yeah. And then you just go and you just like swap out the battery, and the homeowner, the resident, doesn't have to do anything. They just pay for the service. And I mean, they'll make the company would make money, and it's a totally decentralized model. Anybody can do it. But the tech already exists, because you basically just need solar panels, inverters, charge controller, and deep cycle batteries. That's all you need. Now, that's only if you've got steady sunshine, but that's just one idea.
Yeah.
And so then think what happens when you are energy independent. Like imagine, I mean, I don't want to go too deep into it today, but the feeling that we have knowing that we are not federal employees.
Yeah.
And all of a sudden it's like, whew, dude, it still hits me.
Yeah.
I'm like, oh,
I'm not a part of that.
Yeah.
I don't have to, I can look at the whole election thing happening and like just laugh at it for the WWE match that it is.
Totally. Yeah. And it's just the freedom that you feel when you're just going down the street and you just see that people are like freaking out. You're like, what are you? I remember, you know? And then it's like, you know, a policy officer comes by, and I'm so nice to them,
right?
Because I genuinely appreciate the work that I believe they intend to do. And I'm equally at peace with knowing that if any sort of infringement, any sort of assault, any sort of kidnapping, any sort of battery were to happen, then it would be like, let me see the warrant.
Yeah.
And let me see. Okay, there's no clerk signature.
Yeah.
That means there's no injured party, which means what you're doing right now is you're on the verge of committing a crime.
Yeah.
You're about to violate U.S. Title 18, Section 241, 242, and you're committing a war crime against the civilian population, brother. That's a 10-year felony. So I think you should get the DA on the phone right now and want your supervisor here immediately. And the peacefulness that comes from knowing that is incredible.
Yeah.
So why not have more of that kind of feeling?
Yeah.
What about energy? What about food? What about security? Like we talked about a little bit at the meetup, but if shit hits the fan and I end up having to do perimeter defense, I messed up in my strategy because that's not me. I could, I'm sure, better now than I used to be able to, but I'm nowhere near a specialist. But I have something to offer for the people who are specialists. And so if that day came, everybody knows their job.
Shilajit is one of the world's most popular superfoods. It's loaded with over 40 trace minerals, fulvic and humid acids, antioxidants, and more. It's a resin or tar-like substance that seeps out of the rocks of the Himalayas at extremely high altitudes, formed from centuries worth of decomposing plant matter and microbial activity, distilled by pure rainwater and pressurized by tons of mountainous rock. In a way, you could say it's kind of like the lifeblood of the earth itself, and we can use it to enhance our daily lives by absorbing its power into our body cells. However, if you've tried Shilajit in the past, you know it's true when I say it does not taste good, and that almost seems like an understatement. Some people say it's like licking an old used ashtray, and some people get a little more descriptive than that. Let your imagination run wild. It's pretty bad. But one thing is for certain. I've tried tons of Shilajit products, and no one has ever been able to cover the flavor, let alone make it taste good, until now. My friends at Organifi just released these new Shilajit gummies, and they actually taste good. They deliver 250 milligrams per serving of pure Himalayan Shilajit. Shilajit's benefits include supporting energy production, healthy hormone levels, performance and recovery, promoting collagen synthesis and heart health, increasing cellular energy, and decreasing fatigue. Shilajit has become super trendy in the superfoods and holistic health world for obvious reasons, and people have long been desperate for a solution to the flavor problem. That's why in the few months since Organifi released these, they've already sold out several times. Visit Organifi.com/TWF. That's ORGANIFI.com/TWF, or just head to the show notes. Take a look at their whole collection, and when you go to checkout, use promo code TWF. That code is going to give you a 20% discount on all of their products, and they have a lot of amazing products other than their Shilajit gummies. Find out how these superfoods can help you on your health journey today with Organifi.
So if shit hits the fan, and according to this one plan where if I'm on my land, if for whatever reason, let's say it's cartel members, let's say it's just people that haven't eaten in forever who are not, an effective part of our community, who want more than the contributions that we've already decided to give. For whatever reason, if we're under attack and it becomes an us versus them situation, that's a divine appointment. Everybody is there by their own intent, by their own choices, their own expectation. Do no harm and take no shit are completely like they are two sides of the same coin.
Yes. So
if I have a responsibility to protect the people that are close to me, and someone else has intent to harm them, then the way that I do no harm is by creating as little harm as possible, which means that there may need to be a neutralization.
Yeah. And
that will not be, it will not be a meaningless experience. But if it came down to the actual tactics and I'm the one doing it, then I messed up in my strategy because that's not my specialization.
Right.
And so the people who do have that specialization, that I have something of value to offer them and they have something of value to offer me,
right.
Everybody knows what to do. Everybody's got the plan. They know the codes. They know the location. They know the protocols. And again, our minds are not equipped to think strategically or exponentially about violence. And I'm very appreciative because of some fight background, but also because of a little bit of study of history, that there are things that happen routinely around the world. They're happening right now that are unthinkable for the average person, especially, a lot of, first world people. But in thinking through those things, there is a liberation. There is just so much.
Like doing shadow work, man.
Yeah.
It is.
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah.
Like even thinking like, wow, like think of the darkest, most evil thing and think at some level, in some scenario, if shit hit the fan, am I capable of that? Am I capable of doing that level of evil?
Yeah.
And really reconciling with that.
Yeah.
Like that's human.
Yeah. Well, and I think even good and evil, if positive intent is always assumed, and I have yet to find something more useful than believing that. I think it's more useful to believe that everybody has a positive intent. Then good and evil is just another way of saying that which I like and that which I don't like. And so if somebody is trying to, do harm to me, and I can assume that they have a positive intent because they're trying to save themselves, they're trying to feed their family. Like, I don't judge that. I wouldn't allow it, but I don't judge it.
Yeah.
There would just be a sort of emotionless consequence of their choice. And so if somebody were to attack, to infringe, to harm, damage, kill, then I would assume that they made the choice to receive the consequences. And if I'm responsible for, or someone that I'm connected with is responsible for that consequence, then that would have to be a remorseless decision, because remorse is the byproduct of making decisions that are outside of your value system. But if you're in alignment with your value system and there are no contradictions within your value system, then the actions that you take are always within integrity. And then that understanding the harmony and the dynamic of natural law removes good and evil.
Right.
Like the lion that eats the gazelle is not evil.
No.
Unless you're hearing David Attenborough on, Woke Planet Earth, who that week they want you to cheer for the gazelle. Next week, they're going to be cheering for the lion because the mama cubs and there's so many gazelle. Why can't they just give a few? Billionaires, it's just like, what? But nature doesn't have good and evil.
Yeah.
It's savage.
Yeah.
But it's beautiful.
Yeah.
And
symbiotic.
Yeah. It's perfectly symbiotic. And it's our human perspective of the finality of death that creates all this fear. But look at a gazelle. When it gets taken by a predator, it will kick, it will fight, it would get away. But the moment it can't get away, it just goes limp. It just leaves its body. It's like so peaceful.
Yeah.
And to me, that seems like the ultimate combination of a glorious death and a peaceful one. Like,
that is, yeah.
It's powerful, man. Dolphins, when they get stuck in fishing nets, they'll try and get out. And if they can't, they just relax. They leave their body.
Wow.
Like it's like taking off your shoes. It's like, oh, I was a dolphin. That was fun.
What are some of the things you think that this is such a tough one to ask because it's scenario dependent, it's individual location dependent, time and space dependent, but that people, when they're thinking along the lines of prepping, tend to overlook. So obviously, like we touched on this and like food and water, the basics, shelter.
Yeah.
But what are some things that people, because we're living in modernity, especially if you're listening to this and you have the capability to do this, likelihood is
you're probably in air conditioning right now.
Yeah, you're probably
you might be driving a car.
Right. Nothing wrong with that. We're both doing it too.
Yeah.
But just saying, like, what are some things that people who live like that tend to overlook when it comes to these potentials for the future?
I love this question so much. I started a Telegram channel called Go Time, and it's for, people who are mindful of this, but I want to do it in the way that we're talking about. And
is that open to everyone, by the way, or no?
It is now.
Okay, it is now.
Yeah.
Great.
Yeah,
I'll link it in the show notes then for people who are interested.
Yeah. And one of the things that we've talked about we do a Zoom call usually every 2 weeks, is that, again, the dopamine, trip to Cabela's and now you're John Wick, this fantasy, like somebody who takes a martial arts class and thinks they're Bruce Lee. It's like, you don't even know what you don't know. So one of the biggest gaps that people can start to close immediately is to actually begin having experiences that are removed from, like you said, modernity. And I mean, I've been teaching this for years anyway, just as a way of preventing drone culture from infecting your mind and keeping you a slave. Sleep in your backyard.
It is, dude, I feel like you're reading my mind half this time. Literally this weekend, we're sleeping in our backyard.
Yeah, dude.
I'm not.
No. And that's the thing. Well, it's because you're a kick-ass dad and because you and Kyle, like you guys are doing it right.
Yeah.
In my estimation. Then even something as simple as that changes your orientation and it makes you more self-referring and less external referring. A couple of weeks ago, I was giving a speech in Toronto at my friend Giovanni Marsico's event. He had like 12, 13, 1,400 people. It's like a big event.
You sent the video. It was cool.
Oh, yeah.
Especially what you said at the very end.
Oh, yeah. That was good.
Incredible.
Well, so I finished the talk and I had an event back here in Austin for Sigma University, but it wasn't until Thursday.
Mm-hmm.
And so I was all ready to like fly back on Sunday. I'm like, why am I in a hurry? I literally don't need to be back until Thursday dinner, 7:00 downtown Austin. Huh. Immediately the thought pops in, fuck, I want to take a bus. So I took a Greyhound bus from Toronto to Austin, 46 hours, and had stops at Buffalo and Cleveland and Nashville and all these places. And dude, the peacefulness that came from just stepping off of the treadmill for a minute. And I felt like I literally just had my bag. I had some cash in my pocket and I'm like, let me just do this life for like 3 days. And I'm like now counting like my money very carefully instead of just like, oh yeah, just use my card. It's like, oh, how much cash do I have on me? I was like, interesting. I'm not going to buy another bottle of water. I'm going to keep the bottle that I bought in Toronto and I'm going to refill it. And those little switches. And then next thing you know, you're orienting to this very interesting crowd of, you know, this subculture of Greyhound bus riders.
Yeah.
And it's like, huh, I can feel the eyes on me.
Yeah.
Because I don't yet fit in with the group.
Right.
Interesting. And you just start orienting yourself around that. And I taught full classes while I was on the bus, like amazing. Sigma University, where we have a co-ed community. I had ethical cult building, Sell with Soul, sales training, private client calls. And they loved it. They were just like, this is so awesome. And my point is that the term that I first thought of was, it was like a luxury fast. Mm-hmm. Like I'm fasting from luxury because I choose to live a luxurious life. You know, I live in the tallest building in Austin, top floor. I, you know, drive a truck, you know, all the stuff that I want, I've got. But the idea of a luxury fast made so much intuitive sense. And it was just like bringing resourcefulness and ideas back to life. The way your brain functions when your world shrinks down is so beautiful. And I knew the term luxury fast, like it just came to me, but I was like, there's got to be a better term. The universe is perfect. Literally, like 2 days after I got back, I'm out for a walk around downtown back in Austin, reflecting on the experience. And I'm walking by the JW Marriott and there's a restaurant outside. I'm just enjoying all these people just like chattering and doing their thing. And I look and I see somebody that I recognize. So I went up and I gave him shit. It was Chris Williamson, Modern Wisdom. And I was like, excuse me, sir, can I have your autograph? And he's like, what the, oh, because it's just hilarious. Yeah. And we hadn't seen each other in a while. So we were catching up. I told him about the bus trip and he was like, oh, you mean like a hedonic reset? I'm like, yes, Chris Williamson. That's exactly what I mean. A hedonic reset is much better than my term luxury fast. But as weird as it seems, it might not seem related to food and ammo and generators and all this, but ultimately resourcefulness trumps resources all day long. Skills beat supplies every day of the week. And the most important skills to have are the inner skills of self-reliance, self-trust, situational awareness, improv, creative thinking, communication skills, all of that. So putting yourself in environments, regardless of whether or not you think the apocalypse is going to happen, it's how you be a good human. It's how you get better at being a human. the more environments you can be comfortable in, the more healthy you are. The fewer environments you can be comfortable in, the less healthy you are.
Amen.
The greater the range of people you can get along with, the better a human you are. The less number of people that you vibe with and get along with, I think you suck as a human.
Yeah.
Like you're not you're a bad human. You're just bad at being a human.
You're bad at being human.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So like having that 46-hour bus trip was so powerful and so fun and so freeing. And if people start having more experiences that are outside of their normal thing, they'll be better off in every possible way. And then your creative thinking, your intuitive connection to your thoughts, your ability to think clearly, critically, strategically, to prioritize, to triage, to be decisive, all of that just comes online. And if the world doesn't come to a halt or civilization doesn't collapse, you're better off in every way. So it's that sort of strategic spontaneity that I think is very useful for people.
I love that because it's all about becoming more resilient and adaptive.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
Yeah. It's incredible. Yeah. Man, is there anything else you want to cover related to this?
There's always more.
I know.
It's because it's
for the context of this. Because what I'm going to do for those that are listening and watching, Jesse's my homie. So this is like a casual conversation, and that's what it's felt like the whole time. But I'll link the group that you have in the show notes. Thank you for opening that up to anyone who's listening or watching this. But the point is, you can go watch endless amounts of prepping videos that get to the practicality of like, you must have this amount. All that I won't say is irrelevant. It becomes less relevant if you have not addressed what we're addressing here.
Exactly.
First.
Exactly.
This is what needs to be addressed first. Then, once you have cultivated that, okay, how do I want to approach prepping? And I love what you said there at the end about putting yourself outside of the traditional cog in the wheel. Even if you don't live as a cog in the wheel of the system, if you're just on this like repetitive lifestyle droning about and you don't have room for spontaneity in your life to be able to be like, oh, I'm going to go do something that's totally uncharacteristic. I don't. It was like medicine for me to hear that. It's like, shit, I could be better about this. I am going camping in my backyard literally this weekend with my kids.
Yep.
But on that note, it's forced me to this act of going camping in my backyard. Like, okay, what are the things that I do need? Thinking back to my Army days of being in the field training, like what are the things that we did that allowed us to exist outside of modernity, and not only exist, but thrive outside of modernity.
Yes.
Right. And thinking through those things and being able to show that to my kids in a fun way that also just happens to be the way that gets them prepared for whatever negative scenario may come is amazing. It's gamifying it.
Yes.
That's a way to do it, man.
Yes. Well, and that, especially for people that have kids, there's a great movie, Life is Beautiful. It was an Italian movie, remarkably unwoke and just beautiful. I think it was in black and white. And it's a story of this just very lovely dude. He's Italian and he lives in the countryside and he's just like a regular guy. And he like meets a woman, falls in love, they have a kid. And then World War II hits. And next thing you know, he and his son are being taken to a concentration camp. And the whole movie is about how he protects his son from the horrors of the concentration camp by telling him the whole thing is a game. You don't get points if you cry. If you say you're hungry and they hear you, we lose points. Here, hide here. Don't let them find you because you're going to lose all your points. And I won't say how it ends, but it's beautiful. Like one of the most incredible things ever. And I think that's the power that we have within ourselves to like, is this like, are the things that we're afraid of worth fearing? I don't know. I don't think so. And I'm at the time of this recording, I'm not partnered. I don't have offspring. And a lot of what I'm saying and teaching may not resonate for somebody who has children. But I have a very strong understanding that the souls don't, there's no accidents, and every soul is here for its own journey, and that we're here with others, but we're not here for others. And the best thing that a parent can do is live their own most self-authorized, deeply fulfilling life, and let the kids see that. And then let those kids have the freedom to be who and what they came here to be, unconditionally loving. And if you want it, you'll figure it out. And letting them see that. I think that's the future.
Beautiful. Beautifully said.
Yeah, man.
Thank you for doing this, man. This was an awesome conversation.
Always an honor, Alec.
Loved having these props that we both bought ours.
That's right. That's right. We can set up a barter station after. I'll trade you 2 spaghetti and meat sauce for whatever you got there.
Yeah, I have. What do I have here? I have teriyaki style chicken.
Oh,
I wonder if these are better than MREs. I don't know, but yeah. Okay, so for those who are watching, listening, please check out all of Jesse's offerings. That'll all be in the show notes. And yeah, man, thank you so much for being here.
My pleasure, man. More to come.